On a dark night in a huge city, one of the brothers approached the eldest and said he wanted Soho to take over as head of the trade guild in his place. Soho was shocked at his brother and didn't expect such words from him. The youngest said it's the eldest son's legal right, and he is like the youngest in the family, so it makes no sense for him to hold such a position. But Soho stood his ground and replied to his brother that he was much more talented than him in this field. And the main reason why they were able to go from an insignificant trade guild to one of the three greatest. And he doesn't like having no responsibility at all and slacking off. And if he became head of a trade guild, he would have to attend dinners with business associates and play along with their chatter. And he'll also be on the receiving end if the guild's reputation is ruined. And he doesn't want any of that. Junior laughed a little and told his brother that they were done for now, and they would do as Soho wished. Soho soon saw his world enveloped in flames, and everything he and his family had spent so long building and wiping them off the face of the earth. And the man who had guarded him since he was a child, his second brother, Mr. Chan of the Money Pavilion, had died. But that wasn't all. In this battle, Mr. Lim of the Sea Breeze Pavilion had fallen, and the commander of the Silver Wind Squad and even the head of the Sunset Pavilion, everyone he knew, was now dead and lying in front of him. The youngest son of the Silver Sea Trading Guild, Yen Soho, remained alive in this battle. But he realized that all of this had happened because of that vile head of the White Sky Namgung Kong Trading Guild. Kong stood in front of him and held his sword out to Soho's throat and said he was sorry it would end in his death. Soho was not afraid of anything at this moment and asked the enemy, "Isn't the White Sky Trade Guild part of the Murima Alliance? And is it okay to engage in such a thing when it is supposed to represent righteous Murim?" Khan responded bluntly that upper management knows Soho is putting sticks in the wheels of their cause. "Shouldn't you have tempered your ardor earlier? With that kind of money, you should have sat on the throne." Soho didn't know what he was talking about and said they failed to compete because of their incompetence, and after all, that's all he can say? That's just ridiculous. Kong was surprised at such a bold reply, and suddenly Soho gained energy in his hands at that moment and shouted with an attack that deafened the old man. But Kong was quicker and reached out with his foot and pulled Soho aside. Soho clutched his injured body and sat on his knees. But Kong said that it was impossible to let his guard down with him because it was even possible to get killed that way. And it is precisely because Soho is so dangerous that they will eliminate the Silver Sea Trade Guild. And it's time to say goodbye to him. After chopping off Soho's head, he immediately felt that it was all for nothing. And does the life of a mere merchant carry no weight at all in the world of Murim martial arts? And now he realizes that if he had learned to fight since he was a child, and if their trade guild had been able to spread their influence more strongly, perhaps then they would all still be alive. But suddenly he was in his head and opened his eyes to the fact that someone was addressing him and calling him young master. Soho didn't understand what was even going on. After all, he had said goodbye to his life and died by Kana's sword. The guy told him that he understood that Soho's health left a lot to be desired, but you can't sleep in on your first day on the job. Soho wiped his sleeping eyes and thought, what had happened? And how was he still alive? But he heard the guy's words like a blur. The guy was saying that he had asked the Lord to go through the stocks of last year's harvest and analyze the total. Soho felt like his vision was blurred and he couldn't hear anything. The guy was still saying that the head of the trade guild was really concerned about the young master's health, and was he willing to let him into bed? Soho realized that if he was still alive, then Namgung Kong must be in front of him. Without thinking, he immediately flew at him with his fists. But the guy stepped aside and the young gentleman missed. But he was a little surprised. The guy immediately picked up the love stick and smacked the gentleman on the head, asking, "Is he not awake yet?" Soho immediately felt a familiar feeling on him. He realized that this man was not Namgung Kong. So it must be Chief Inspector Usioak. But he remembered that the inspector had died a long time ago. How could he be alive? Soho asked, was he going to hell? AK started laughing at him and saw that the gentleman was still awake. AK said that in all the years he had trained 3 young masters, no one had ever tried to hit him. And the young master is very, very special. Soho replied that he hadn't fully recovered and it was just a misunderstanding. AK got angry and told the young master to go to his room and look only at the wall. Soho headed to his room and sat down at the reflection chair. And remembered that he remembered how he died. And why was he being scolded by Chief Inspector Usioak instead? But Soho remembered that analyzing last year's crop, that was the first assignment he'd been given as he began to learn their business. And after that lecture, he felt completely crushed. That day, AK scolded him for his poor analysis. Soho suddenly remembered and turned to Eunhae. Suddenly, his bodyguard immediately came down behind him and answered the master. Soho asked him how old is he now? AM asked the gentleman, did he get hit that hard? The gentleman didn't want to say any more and asked him if he could just answer the question. AM replied to the gentleman that yesterday was his 15th birthday. Soho was shocked to hear his age. After all, he knew that at the time of his death, he was 39. AM told the gentleman that the gentleman first wanted to hit the chief inspector, now asking his age. Is the gentleman sure they don't need to call a doctor to take care of him? After all, he knows one very good professional when it comes to mental health. Soho looked at his hands and saw that his skin was supple without a single blister. Was he really young again? M saw the master's movements and asked what he was doing. Soho replied that it hurts. Soho still couldn't believe he was alive, and remembering his death so vividly, for his family lay dead before him. And the instant the sword of the White Sky Trade Guild had passed through his neck, Soho gripped his neck and realized that everything was real. He had gone back in time, but the massacre had still happened. And now he will promise himself that he will not let it happen again. AM asks the gentleman what's wrong with his face? Does he need to go to the restroom? Soho still remembers what happened in his past life. He also knows how to act under those circumstances. And now he's using this information to become stronger so they can stand up to the Murim Alliance. But as he thought about it, Soho decided to check with Amma what had she said earlier that he had turned 15 yesterday. AM replied that it is, and what is even going on with the gentleman today? Soho asked, then what year is it? He immediately counted on his hands and said it was bad. After all, there was only a week left before the event. Soho told his man that there was something they needed to do, but to make sure no one knew about it. AM asked, but what needs to be done? Mr. apparently really has started puberty. Soho replied that this was not the case. In the evening when the pavilion remained empty, the guy and asked the mercenary if he was sure. The mercenary asked him in return, why shouldn't he? The boy replied that the youngest had begun to master the trade. And he heard his bodyguard is a skilled martial artist. He wondered if the mercenary would really be able to do it stealthily. The mercenary asked, why would he be afraid of a child dying of a disease? He can't fight, he can't even walk without a cane. And he actually has a plan for what to do with the bodyguard. So he doesn't have to worry about that. If anything goes wrong, just kill all the witnesses. And everything stays that way. The lad laughed and remembered that the mercenary had once served him as his master. The mercenary didn't recognize this and said that the junior of the Silver Sea Trading Guild was destined to die young. And if he can interrupt his suffering, doesn't the guy think he'll be grateful to him? And he's sure Soho is still waiting to die right now as they speak. At this point, AM asked the young master where they were going. Soho answered him that as he already knew, he was quite morbid. And he needs to exercise. Even though they're doing the exercise now. But along the way they might stumble upon something interesting if they walk to different places. AM asked, like what? Soho replied that it was the best miracle medicine Zhang Yuan had. That night, AM asked Soho to leave the place. Soho in his heart did not want to do that and asked how could she leave her? AM replied that it was her duty and she lived for it. And she is fine, so the master has to run. And even if she dies, as long as it's not in vain, she's fine with it. Soho was still indignant and didn't want to leave. But AM said he had never heard her, even when he was young. Would he make her death in vain? While bidding farewell to the Lord, the enemies burst into the room and the commander ordered the soldiers to capture them. AM stood across from them and told Soho to make it out alive, and she knows he is capable of flying much higher. Soho knew that if he had to name two people from all his life that he could trust the most, there were his loved ones. Coming to her senses, AM asked the gentleman what he was staring at. Soho realized that one of them would be his bodyguard Eunhae, and the second would be his servant Palgak, who at this point is dragging him on his back and telling him he's very cold. Soho knew that what he was looking for now was a miracle cure that would soon cause carnage. And these two are the only ones he can trust in a case like this. AM asked the master what they were looking for. Soho saw everything and answered her to look in front of her. And doesn't she see? He knew and still remembered that it was an energy miracle medicine comparable to the 10,000-year-old snow ginseng, the crystal-clear snow plum. AM became curious and asked, what is it? The master replied that it was an incredible medicine that would cure his illness. AM asked him if he was sure it was okay to use a medicine they didn't know much about. They have plenty of unusual medicines at home, too. Soho replied that no, they wouldn't fit. He knew that his illness was more than just meridian damage. After all, Star Dragon's spiritual harmony is a unique physical state in which a person is born with extremely strong in energy. And in women, the ability to harmoniously control strong in energy is innate, allowing them to become martial arts masters. However, in men, yin energy conflicts with yang energy, which gradually leads to death. And the only way to overcome this, use a miracle remedy with yin energy during adolescence to transform yin into yang. But in his past life, he found out too late, and getting crystal clear snow plum was impossible. M asked the gentleman if he wanted to explain what was going on. Soho apologized and asked her to accept the situation this time. AM was surprised and said she didn't know what he was like. But he didn't seem to listen to his mentors on principle. She immediately ran ahead and said she would be back soon. The boys cheered for her and waited for their awards. Soho realized that he couldn't say he would become stronger than her, but he would become as strong as he could. And so in this life may she not die for his sake. AM stood under the tree and saw that the berries were high, and she was very tired of it all. A couple of days later, the servants met the young master. Soho greeted them all and said good morning. M was resentful and angry because they had been cold for days. The servants suddenly turned to AM. They asked her if she thought the young master had changed lately. After all, it seems to them that there is more energy and lightness in his steps. Hasn't he also grown up? They remember that he was shorter. The maid joined the conversation too and said that his face had changed too. But he was always handsome, but now he's the nicest person she knows here. But she got the feeling that now he was talking like some old man. And when she heard him say good morning, she thought he was the chief inspector. But the girl was in love with him and said that for that matter, he was even cuter that way. AM was indignant and said that they were discussing the young master like this even though he was not yet 20. Let them get down to business immediately. She understood that the young master had recently consumed a miraculous medicine found in the mountains and experienced a bodily transformation. And she's telling the truth that he's changed, just until when is he going to hide it? This is getting unbearable. But Palgak was very glad that the young master was well. But AM promised that if he fell ill again, she would kill him. When he arrived at the money pavilion, he got to work. But Chang-yi, an employee of the money pavilion, was shocked by what he saw and asked the master how he managed to do all this in 2 hours. It would take at least 2 days to do that, and Little was sure he'd done it properly, Chan asked. Soho replied that he didn't write all the documents from scratch. It was just a brief summary, it wasn't that hard. Soho realized he had made a mistake, and he should have worked harder at pretending to be a rookie. After all, he had been doing this for so long in his past life, and his improved condition only quickened his pace. Chan turned to the young master and said that he did not mean to be rude, but even the smallest work in the money pavilion must be done with the utmost care. The financial flows in a trade group are like blood flowing through a person's veins. But what does he think will happen if the information leaks out? Soho asked what the aide meant by saying that he did everything quickly since he was doing it hastily. Chan replied to him that the master had indeed accomplished everything too quickly. And even just a couple days ago, he fell asleep on the job and then tried to punch the DCI. And it's just impossible to believe that anyone would think this job is that good. But Soho understood at that moment what the assistant was thinking. So he decided to offer him a bet. Chan agreed and asked what they would bet on. Soho replied that he would take everything to the chief inspector right away, and they would argue about whether he would approve it or not. Chan said that the master inspector is making a fuss, and is the master confident in his decision? Soho replied that it is not known whether it will happen or not. Chan realized that the master was long overdue for a lesson given his arrogance. So he asked him again what were they arguing about. Soho replied that the loser would take care of all the remaining papers for the day. Chan didn't take umbrage and said he agreed. But Modoi Lord did not stop and added that the one who loses would perform the 0-2 dance at his elder brother's ceremony. And what would he say to such an offer? Chan knew that the 0-2 dance was a traditional dance originating from the Han dynasty in China. Chan immediately thought that the little brat was just messing with him. But it was too late to refuse, so he said yes. But Soho answered him not to chicken out. But the assistant said that on the contrary, he should be the one to tell him. Suddenly, 9th rank officer Ah Sung said that he thought the elder was getting too heated about it. but Chan turned around and answered him to stay out of the man's squabble. Soho too told him that they would go right now. Chan was not frightened and replied that he agreed to it. Arriving at the head, AK asked the young master did he do it all himself? And few pavilion heads could handle such a job. Chan was excited and asked the head to take a closer look. There must be a mistake here. AK asked the aide, is he doubting him now? Chan replied that the head had never approved his work the first time, even though he had been working in the money pavilion for years. But why did they approve the young master's work when he had just begun his apprenticeship? AK hit him with a stick and asked him why he wore glasses. But Soho realized that the problem wasn't his skills. The problem was that Inspector Yu's demands were unrealistically high. And with that said, Soho told Chan that he was looking forward to his dance. Chan realized that he had lost and asked the young master to stop. But Soho waited for no one and closed the door behind him. Suddenly on the way, he met second son Eunhae, who said that the younger one was in a good mood. All he does is make his parents and his older brother worry about his health. And he manages to have fun while doing it? And now he thinks he's just a freak. Soho immediately remembered the moment when his brother lost his head during the war in the past. Soho greeted his brother. But Eunhae was displeased and asked the younger one why he was pretending to be friendly. Did he want to die? Soho remembered that they had been at odds at the time. Eunhae said he was against the younger man learning their trade. After all, the father will worry even more if he gets sick from overwork. And when Junior goes to see his father, you don't have to wiggle around pretending to be sick. And if he faints again like last time, he'll just finish him off. Soho told his brother that he would be careful. But Eunhae told the younger man that he didn't like him, and immediately closed the door behind him. Soho felt that for the first time seeing his father and brother since his return, he actually had something to show them. Sohong realized that according to his memories of his past life, a fire would break out in the money pavilion in a few days. Due to this fire, a low-ranking official on duty at the pavilion died and all documents were burned to the ground, resulting in massive waste. And it was a carefully planned arson by someone. And now he realizes that in order to prevent it in advance, he should be able to move freely whenever he wants. Chan saw the young master's gaze and asked why he was staring at him. Soho replied that it was nothing and he was just leaving. And to have that opportunity, he will have to change the opinion of others about himself. At this time, there was a family reunion at the main residence of the Silver Sea Trade Guild. At the table sat the first son of the trade guild, Eunhae. He asked Eunhae how the work at the Sunset Pavilion was going. It's different from the Sea Breeze Pavilion, isn't it? Eunhae replied that, to be honest, it was even easier for him because he didn't have to use his brain, only his body. And he seemed to like working in the field better. Eunhae turned to the younger one and asked him, he too is receiving hands-on training at the money pavilion, right? Soho replied to his brother that it's like that. But Eunhae said that learning is good, but there's no need to rush. He worries that the younger one might overdo it. Soho let his brother know not to worry. After all, he was working within his capabilities. And he realized that his older brother had always been like that, even in the past. And that's why he never wants to see such a sight in this life ever again. Eunhae asked them what kind of nonsense they were talking about. Is it within his capabilities? Does anything count for him other than eating and sleeping within his capabilities? Eunhae disagreed with him and asked him if he really thought it was appropriate to talk to his younger brother like that. But Soho had always known that his other brother had always had such a nasty temper. Eunhae replied that it's because the older man always has his back and the brat doesn't know his place. How long do they have to deal with him? Someone who's just a burden on the family. Eunhae got angry and yelled at the other brother to stop talking like that because he was already overstepping his bounds. Eunhae asked, hasn't he said what everyone already knows? He spits blood at the monthly rituals and walks leaning on a cane. What kind of job could he even be given in a trade guild? Soho realized it was like that. And even as an adult, it still hurt to hear it. But this is his problem and he has to solve it himself. So Soho decided to approach Eunhae himself. But the other brother got angry and told the younger brother not to call him by name. Soho agreed and replied that, anyway, since his father was about to arrive, they'd better stop there. And he's sure his father won't be happy to see such a pathetic sight. And the first brother had better calm down too. Eunhae replied that he too recognized that he had gotten too carried away. But Jongo wondered, what was it? Although he had always known the younger one to be shrewd, today his brother seemed unusually mature to him. Suddenly, the servant said that the head had returned. Soho was shocked to see his father. He couldn't believe it. The eldest was also very happy to see him and personally stood up himself and said that he welcomed his father. The head said he apologized for being late, and the meeting lasted a little longer. The sons replied that it was okay, they were just getting started. The head noticed all the sons but said Soho's face was flushed. Is he not feeling well? Soho replied that no, it was fine. He realized that the reason his face was flushed was because he had seen his father die in front of his eyes in a past life. Gilson asked his son did he have anything to say. Soho tried to come to his senses and get a grip. But such a display of emotion is not characteristic of him. Nothing has happened in this life yet. And he has to think about how to protect his guild. And will only have to focus on that goal. Soho stood up and told his father that he could see right through him. And actually he did have something to say. Soho asked his father to sit down so they could talk things over. Soho asked his father if he remembered what they had talked about before he started training at the money pavilion. Gilson replied to his son that he had memorized everything thoroughly. He told his son that day that since he was born weak, he was not given full responsibility. And he had only gotten a general understanding of the work without completing a full training. Soho asked, is this really acceptable? But one day he too would have to become the head of the pavilion. Eunhae thought at that moment, why would Junior say such a thing? But the head suddenly put his utensils on the table and said that his son had noticed correctly. But what does he mean by that? Soho replied that he wanted to take on all responsibilities, including night shifts, just like his older brothers and other pavilion members. But Gilson said he would not allow it. But Soho didn't stop and asked if that was too harsh a refusal. But Gilson replied, what can't be can't be. Especially night duty. It requires staying up all night and managing a night guard. And with his current state, it's absolutely impossible. I agree with the rest, but not the night shifts. Does that make sense to your son? Soho realized that it wouldn't help. After all, to prevent a fire in the money pavilion, he would have to be on night duty on the day of the incident. Soho said, and if he proved he could physically handle the night shifts, would his father let him? Gilson replied that of course. But how is the son going to prove it? Soho immediately replied confidently that he wanted a duel with Eunhae. Eunhae asked the younger man what he had just said. Eunhae was also surprised and asked him, is he out of his mind? Soho asked, what's wrong? Is he afraid of losing? Eunhae asked the younger man, what is he saying? Soho turned to his brother and asked, is there a problem? Since they are both concerned about his health, isn't calming those worries an act of deference to his parents? He realizes that Eunhae has recently become a top-notch fighter. If he can stand up to him, won't that prove that he can handle all the responsibilities in the money pavilion? Eunhae turned suddenly to his father and said that now that he had heard it, the younger man's words made sense as well. Would he authorize the duel? Gilson replied to his son that he agreed. Django was indignant and appealed to his father. But Gilson said let them compete. Soho will also learn to take responsibility for his words. And sooner or later everyone goes through trials. And it looks like this moment has come for Soho. Soho could see that his father really thought he didn't stand a chance against his brother. And he thinks that's to be expected. The head said, considering what a difference it would make between him and Eunhae if he lasted even a minute and a half. This ensures he is allowed to take on responsibilities, including night shifts. Can he handle it? Soho immediately replied that he was grateful to his father for the opportunity. But Eunhae was not happy about it. And he said that if it became too dangerous, let him surrender without delay. There's no shame in that. Soho smiled and replied that he would keep it in mind. But honestly, he didn't think it would be necessary. The next day, Soho and his other brother went out to fight. And his friends were the referees. But AM was shocked and asked what the young master was doing in the dueling arena. He could barely walk recently. Soho says hello to her and shows a hand gesture for her to be quiet. Palghak decided to console her and told her that he would be fine. AM replied the same, that he should be fine. But Django asked his father if he was worried. The head asked in reply, why should he be worried? Eunhae replied, something about Eunhae looking down on Soho from above without hiding, and maybe he wouldn't be able to hold back. The head looked at his second son, unaware that he was looking down at the younger one. But he suggested that the older one watch for now. But AM was still wondering what was going on. And why all of a sudden the young master and the second young master are having a duel? The head and his sons have gone completely insane. And this guy doesn't even think about how it looks from the outside, and he's still acting like a seducer. And perhaps someone had possessed him? The head immediately told them to beat the drum. But AM didn't want to do that and tried to refuse. But the head looked at her with his gaze and told her to hit the drum. AM shouted that she didn't care, and hoped the young master would win. With a wave of her hand she immediately struck the drum. Jinhong thought Soho was a freak who didn't know his place. Because being the youngest, he got too much love growing up. So he thinks the whole world owes him. And today, as his big brother, he would show him what reality was. Jinho immediately pounced on the younger one with his attack. But Jinho remembered the past when he first met his younger brother. His mother said that their second son couldn't take his eyes off his younger brother. Touching him with his hands, Jinho blushed and told his father that he was still a baby. But his father told him that therefore he should take care of him in the future. After all, he is his brother. But Jinho always wondered why he had to do that. He always expected him and Jano to be good older brothers, but he never noticed that the jerk had never been a good son. And now he realizes he can't do it. Soho stood still for the first blow and dodged it at the last moment. But Soho didn't know at what level he should fight him, so he applied the 12th form of the snow dragon technique. Jinho was shocked to feel the younger one dodge. The older son was also watching and didn't expect this. But at the last moment, Soho couldn't stay on his feet and fell to the ground. He said that using the stepping technique for the first time made him a little woozy. He had learned the martial art from books, and given that his body had gone through some changes, this was the first time he had used it, so he was lucky to dodge the attack, but he fell. Soho tried to use everything to pretend he didn't know how to fight. Jinho could tell at once that the younger man was mocking him. But that didn't stop him, and he immediately continued to attack. But Soho dodged each time and the sword didn't touch him. Jinho still didn't understand how this kid was doing all this, and when had he had time to learn it? The head also remembered his words to his second son that Soho's words were not to be taken lightly. He would never compete with him without thinking. After all, Soho is the greatest genius in the history of the Silver Sea Trade Guild. And even though he said it, he didn't expect Soho to be that good. No matter how unofficial this fight is, he knows that Jinho doesn't fight at full strength. But still, Soho, who couldn't even keep his balance for such a long time, confronting Jinho, a first-class master. And he had told him earlier that if Soho were to learn from a true master, he couldn't wait to see how much he would grow. And now he knows that the one he's worried about now is not Soho, but Jinho. Jinho was very angry and shouted, asking why he couldn't get into it. He had once heard that Soho was the greatest genius in the history of the trade guild. And so he's going to take away the title of their guild's greatest battle genius as well? As a child, Jinho would play with Soho and look around the corner of the house telling his brother that there were no adults in sight. But at that moment, Soho fell to the ground and held the blood that came from his body with his eyes in tears. And that day, his father told him that from now on, the chief inspector would train him in martial arts. But Jinho apologized to his father and replied that he wanted to be trained by him. But father replied to him that his brother was very sick, and he needed to give in so that he could take care of him. And Jinho is now his older brother. The healer examined the boy and told the head that Soho was in critical condition. They need to stop the blood. But the head asked what was the reason? Jinho cried that day and realized that it was all because of him. The healer replied to the head that the second young master had mistakenly given him the yang energy elixir. Jinho told his father that he just wanted Soho to get better faster. But the head didn't answer him and pushed him aside. The head asked the doctors what Soho's condition was. The healer replied that he was not well. Even if he survived, the internal wounds would be terrible. Jinho knew that even from the beginning, all the problems were because he was born weak. With swords clashing, Soho told his brother that family can be difficult. Jinho asked him what the hell he was talking about. Soho replied that since it was a bond closer than any other, they were destined to carry a deep-seated animosity even if they were to spend a lifetime together. Jinho was shocked and said that he had already heard that and he didn't care, and launched a couple of attacks with his wooden sword. Jinho asked the judge how much time was left. AM replied that it was about 9 seconds. But Jinho suddenly changed his energy and said that since Soho is so confidently talking nonsense, apparently things are easy for him for now. But it'll be over soon, he promised. The head saw this and asked his son what he was doing. Let him immediately subdue his feelings. Eunhae was completely covered in his anger and he heard no one around him. All he saw was the target. Eunhae was not frightened and disagreed with his brother that it was nonsense, and realized that he didn't know anything at all. Eunhae has said these words in the past, it can be hard to be in a family. And because it's a bond closer than any other. They are destined to carry a deep-seated animosity even if they are to spend a lifetime together. And when you live with these thoughts, you gradually forget why you started to hate a person. His hatred for him is exactly like that. He has the pain of not being able to change anything, the guilt in front of him, and the feeling that he was always second best. It all turned to hatred for him. And Eunhae is his only little brother, and it's not his fault. And asks for his forgiveness, which will make him bear the weight of his emotions. He procrastinated too long, and now this is his apology. And he doesn't deserve forgiveness from him. Releasing his letter to his brother, he realized he couldn't do that. And did he really think this was all just about him? Eunhae picked the perfect moment and dodged his brother's attack and knew they were too young and stupid. Everyone was surprised at this decision by Eunhae. And Eunhae saw the younger man let go of his sword. Eunhae told his brother that he may have added chi energy to the sword, but his attack is the same as the first one. It's too obvious. Eunhae realized that he couldn't forgive his brother, but he would just let it go. He picked up the moment and immediately threw out his fist punch. But AM looked at the clock and shouted that time was up. The head said that since there was no victory in 10 minutes, the young master was declared the winner. In the evening at the money pavilion, AK received the news and asked the assistant, "Did the young master win?" Chan replied that no one can know about it. Ak said that it would definitely remain a secret. And the way he organized the paperwork, Eunhae's a godsend. And he'll be sure to recommend him as his assistant and have him working 24 hours a day. The next day, Eunhae went straight into his training, but his thoughts kept him busy. Nothing was working for him from his memories. And Eunhae's words about family being difficult never left his mind. Out of anger, he immediately tossed his sword aside. Everything pissed him off, but what pissed him off even more was that in addition to the anger, he also felt a strange sense of relief. But seeing her maid, he asked what his brother was doing. The girl was surprised and replied that the chief inspector had dragged him away with him. Eunhae was surprised to hear about the chief inspector, but he wondered why he had called him. Ak met the young master and said that there was talk that he was now taking on a full slate of duties. Eunhae replied that that was correct. And is there something wrong with that? But AK smiled and told Yen's personal assistant to grab it and carry it after him. And from now on, he is now an assistant. The decision was approved by the head of the Silver Sea Trade Guild, so any resistance is futile. Eunhae remembered that the chief inspector of the AK Trade Guild in his past life, the cause of death was recycling. AK told the young gentleman that he would now briefly explain all the duties, and thoroughly explained everything. But so AKA's personal assistant Yang Yong told the young master that there was no need to worry, and soon enough he would start to enjoy the process. Eunhae immediately applied an energy lock on her and told the chief that he didn't think such a thing was possible. Aku wondered and asked why that was. Eunhae realized that telling him it was about the upcoming fire wouldn't work. It would happen between 3 and 5 o'clock in the morning. And to prevent a tragedy, at that moment he should be on night duty. If he's forced to work as an assistant to this madman, he won't even leave the office until midnight, let alone night duty. In a past life, he'd seen his former assistant run out screaming over recycling. And there's no guarantee he won't find himself in the same situation. Eunhae hoped that the chief inspector wouldn't push too hard and he could prevent everything from happening. Eunhae approached him and said he was convinced that the real value of his hands-on training was not in the work itself, but in the deeper understanding of the processes. And besides, he only started training 2 days ago, and I'm sure there are more suitable candidates for the role of assistant. And he wants to figure out the regular tasks of other employees, not get special treatment. He had also heard that the assistant's duties did not include night shifts. Aren't night shifts the core of administrative work? The focus of all the complex and real life of the staff. AK told the young master that he understood his intentions. Eunhae was already pleased and thanked him. But Ak wasn't done with that and said the guy would take over both the daily duties and the night shifts, and accounting for all the other financial costs. But Eunhae was shocked by what he heard and decided to get out of there. The chief inspector's servants immediately chased after him to capture him. The armed force of the Silver Sea Trading Guild worked very quickly and captured the young master. Seeing the duty roster, Soho realized that today was the day when the fire at the Money Pavilion would break out. Also, the accident happened the night Chang'e was on duty. But the problem is he's crazy sleepy. It's like every day exceeds its own limits. I didn't know a person was capable of working that hard. But thanks to the inner energy of the crystal-clear snowplum, he is quickly revitalized through meditation and breathing exercises. But maybe that's why they're giving him more and more things to do. He's already making stuff up. And when it's over, we should get the hell out of here before it ends up like that crazy woman. Soho turned to Chan and said he was counting on him for tonight's duty. Chan replied that he was counting on him too. But Soho knew he had to get through tonight safely first. Chan said that before they started, they'd better have tea. Soho asked him if he himself would. Chan replied that he was fine, but suddenly Soho decided to talk to him and asked him if he had something to say to him. Chan raised his head and answered the master that he did not understand him. And leaving the conversation, he said he would go and make his rounds. Soho was surprised and asked him, alone? Chan replied that he thought it would be better that way. Soho decided to turn to AM, and not seeing her around, he thought she was already asleep. But AM was beside herself and said that she had been here since the beginning. Soho asked her why she had to hide in strange places all the time. AM replied that it was probably just a habit. Soho asked her if she would like to come down and have tea. AM was surprised and asked what was the occasion. She will come down right away. As she started the tea party, Soho asked her what she thought. AM said it was a little bitter for her, and she also said not to heat it too much. But Soho saw that she had passed out and said that he had expected the tea to be laced with sleeping pills. Putting her on the bed, Soho was tired too and said he'd take a nap too. But it was time to start the rounds anyway. But the enemy at that moment picked up a bucket and put on his hood and went to set everything on fire. And Soho went to catch the arsonist. The enemy was in the Money Pavilion at this time, and after pouring out a bucket of gasoline, he opened his magic fire tool and looked at her smilingly. But then Soho came up and told the enemy that he seemed agitated. The enemy was shocked and immediately turned around. But Soho, seeing his face, immediately took the first step forward and took the fire away from his hands. He looked it over and said, "It speaks very well indeed. The flames are intensified with oil, and the enemy has made careful preparations." Right after all, a Sung Pavilion employee. The son was shocked and asked the young master how he knew. Soho asked him back, would he believe him if he told him he had seen the future? Sun told the gentleman that he wasn't going to tell him anything, was he? Soho asked, is that the only thing that's pissing him off right now? Because the sun was going to set the place on fire and he caught him. That's what he should be worried about. The son began to laugh and replied to the young master that he was right, and it seems that the rumors of his insight were not exaggerated. But the young master came alone, didn't he? Soho looked up and saw that Sung had taken out a knife. Soho told his enemy that he was still out of the relationship, but Sung attacked him immediately, shouting that the gentleman was fooling around. Chan was still on his rounds at this point, and he remembered about young Master Soho, how he had asked him to ask something. But Chan asked him how he had done it. How did he manage to coordinate the documents with the chief inspector the first time? And this is on the second day of training. He's been working at the Money Pavilion for 3 years, and he's never managed anything like this. What kind of magic is that? Soho asked the deputy. Does that make him look like he swallowed a ruler? Chan was surprised and asked when was he like that? But Soho knew all this and asked, who is he kidding? And he doesn't think it's about his uniqueness. He was simply trying not only to do the tasks assigned to him, but also to understand exactly what the chief inspector wanted to accomplish by doing so. And if you work just for a tick, it becomes work for work's sake. And he learned that from his father, what he said. Chan grabbed his head and replied that it was wrong to do so, but it hurt his pride. But Soho said nothing is impossible. Such emotions can be a great stimulus for development. And that's what his father had taught him too. And then Chan got up and said he was going to make his rounds. Soho thought this was strange and asked him, alone? Chan replied that he thought it would be better that way. Chang realized that despite being the heir to the head of the trade group, who would have expected a newcomer to be able to surprise them? And maybe the future of the trade group really depends on him. But even though he's so annoying sometimes, Chan entered the room and taking a can of tea said that there was nothing better than hot tea when the break room was in chaos. and one had to drink tea when it was offered. But looking closer on the shelf he saw something shiny, and it was something he hadn't seen before. There were oil stains on the jar. At this moment, Soho was fighting an enemy who was persistent and wanted to finish his business. Soho charged his fist and said that he just realized, compared to brother Jinho, fighting him was much easier. Soho immediately applied his 12th Snow Dragon subform Snow Dragon Fist Strike technique. The sun did not have time to dodge and received a fist on his head. The sun was shocked and asked immediately, what was it now? Wasn't the young master deathly ill? The sun began to receive a tremendous amount of blows from the young master, and thought he was asleep. But he can't believe that futile job, aimless life. Instead of being born into such a life, living it and then leaving. And now he would bet his life on this 1-inch thick mahjong mystery. As he played, he got angry and started yelling that it was cheating. And how is it possible that he didn't get anything normal? He started blaming his man and saying it was all because of him. But no one else there would listen to him, and they sent him out the door on the first flight, telling him to come again. The sun at this point wondered since when his life had become so insignificant, and so fleeting and ephemeral. But then a guy showed up at his meeting and said Sun was just in a sorry state. But the sun grabbed hold of his leg and started saying he would pay it all back. And he tripled his wager. The master saw it all. The sun told the master everything. The master said that he knows everything. And Sun is just a capable employee of the Money Pavilion from the Silver Sea Trade Guild. And that's why he wants to offer him the chance to work together again. His son thought everything was pointless and no one would let him faint. Soho continued to beat him and said that Sun is no longer a man. He is a servant of truth, speaking the truth only when he is beaten. Soho asked him to answer every question that was asked of him. The sun was completely beaten and there was no living space left on his face. For about 4 mornings, Soho apologized to his family for getting them all up so early, and he hoped they would understand that he had his reasons. And he's sure they got the message, but they just caught a man about to set fire to the Money Pavilion. And it was found to have been planned by the house of the courtesans of Lothus. And the watermill head of the Sea Breeze Pavilion was very helpful in getting a confession from the suspect. And at that moment the sun asked the Lord that he might kill him. The head asked in surprise, the house of the courtesans of Lotus? Is Junior sure about that for sure? Soho realized he was sure, and he felt the depth of this betrayal. The house of Lothus courtesans is one of the 5 most famous escort pavilions in Hubei. They have been their partners for a long time. The head of the Sea Breeze Pavilion, Zak Benchal, said that if he was not mistaken, the Lothus courtesan house owed them quite a large sum of money. And he thinks they were trying to erase any mention of the debt by setting a fire? But the head of the Sunset Pavilion, Eunhae, replied that it would be difficult to identify the culprit if they succeeded. There are quite a few who are in their debt. Guilpin, head of the External Affairs Department and leader of the Silver Wind Squadron, said that he was glad anyway. And now, if it weren't for the young master, they would be sleeping without even knowing about the fire. Soho is also sure that Chang'e would have been burned alive, since if he hadn't, he would have drank tea with sleeping pills. Soho suddenly said he'd had enough praise, and he thinks we should discuss what to do next. Gilpin replied to the Lord that he was right, and he didn't expect that the Lord wouldn't miss an opportunity to brag. But Benchal realized that the young man was getting to the point without delay, and remains calm despite how serious the incident is. And the gentleman is definitely talented. Head AK asked, could they take him down from the tree first? He doesn't feel good knowing he's hanging there. He's human, after all. Soho was surprised, for he had not expected the inspector to say such things. He agreed with him. AK approached Sun and asked if he was alive. The boy replied that he was and thanked the inspector for that. AK immediately punched him and told him that since he was alive, then let him get ready to explain to him what the hell was that nonsense. He worked late last night, and now he's being blown up just because of him. Sitting down at the table, Soho told the others to really wait for the pavilion. Ak was surprised and asked the young gentleman, what did he just say? The head told them to calm down and maybe they would listen to what he was going to say. This is where his work begins. Dami replied that this is an impressive plan. And lies distort the truth and falsity distorts reality. Is that what he meant to quote? Soho knew that lob distorts truth and falsity distorts reality. So the saying goes. Soho tells Hedyen that's right, they need to cover up the truth with lies. They need to convince the Lothus house of courtesans that their plan succeeded. and that would make them show their true intentions. All agreed, and at the end the head asked the inspector what about him? Ak asked them, what's the craziness? Why would they burn down a beautiful building? Soho replied that then, since the majority was in favor, they would set fire to the money pavilion. Soho knew that Eunhae had been carefully carried to safety along with her documents. Soho looked at the money pavilion and saw that it was burning very well. And just like the other time. But it's different now. This fire is a rung on the ladder to the success of their trade guild. Even though the chief inspector will have to work a little more than usual, he thinks it's worth it to send him on a little vacation. Soho asked the assistant when the payment expires at the house of the Lothus courtesans. Chan replied that next month at the Buddha's birthday celebration. Soho said they will then let the situation mature until the right time. They will get that money in a different way. A month later, in one of the 5 most famous escort pavilions in Hubei, people were talking about the recent big fire in the Silver Sea Trade Guild. He was told it was right, and it was in the ears of many, but what happened? They say there were no ashes left of some important contracts. And all the documents relating to the house of the courtesans of Lothus were kept in that library. But someone thought it was odd. And he asked, don't they owe them a rather large sum of money? The guy replied that he thought they were using the fire as an opportunity to not pay the debt. General Manager Seo thought it was all nonsense. Just because the documents were burned does not absolve you from paying the debt. And trust is very important when it comes to business. Doesn't the head of the house see that? And now it has to stop. Chief Superintendent Seo came to the chapter and said he welcomed him. But suddenly girls fell before his feet and he asked what was happening. The head asked the manager what was the matter. Hadn't he ever seen a woman passed out? Seo asked the master had he raised his hand on geisha again. The previous head of the house had imposed a ban. The head waved his hand and told him to spare him that and get to the point already. After all, he makes him want to kill him. Seo thought he was just a goddamn crazy bastard. And he should have quit a long time ago, too. Seo said immediately that it had come to his attention that the head was not going to repay his debt to the Silver Sea Trade Guild. And the documents may have been lost. But he's afraid it would undermine the trust of their old business partner. Bak thought for a moment and replied that he didn't care. The deadline had passed anyway, and he was sure it would have been a problem by now if they'd known. But Seo wanted to agree with him and wasn't done talking yet. But Bak interrupted him and said that they never told them anything. Then the manager should get the hell out of here. But lastly, Seo said that the former head of the house would never do such a thing. Bak was surprised and asked if he was sure. And since he was, let him come closer. Seo walked up to him and wasn't even scared. But Bak turned around and was saying that she had to be around here somewhere. Seo asked, what? Bak found a bottle and smashed it over the manager's head. Bak stood in front of him and asked who was the head of their house now? Or is the father still sitting here? And the superintendent does nothing but hinder him. Should he start listening carefully, or is he unable to? And to make a long story short, once that's over with, they'll start working with Dawn's trade guild. Their demands are sometimes a bit annoying, however, as he already knows Dawn's trade guild. And it's one of the top 3 trade guilds, a direct partner of the Murim Alliance, and is affiliated with the White Sky Trade Guild. And it's worth it to him to deal with it, and he's sure everyone who compares him to his father will finally shut up. Also, this means they won't be working with Silver Sea anymore. But not even know, they would just destroy them instead. Suddenly, all of a sudden, someone burst into the room. Bak got angry and asked the servant, was he breaking in without asking? Or did he have a death wish? The servant replied that he apologized. But it was very urgent. The Silver Sea Trade Guild arrived with all their guards. Bak was shocked and asked, what does that mean? Out of nowhere? The head of Gilsen said that no one would stop them, even considering they came unannounced. But Soho replied that he didn't think security was doing well here, since the house couldn't even pay off its business partners. And they're just an example of how not to do business. Anyway, it's not like they're expecting guests. And then they'll just walk in. Soho simply entered the brothel first and holding a bat was telling the collectors to get to work. Soho was very much into his role and was even happy. AM noticed his face too and wondered what he was happy about. But Soho entered the main room as if it were his home and gave one last shout for the head to return his money. AM realized at once that it was all about money. And even head Gilson was himself surprised by his son. Bak asked the guy who he was? But Soho looked at the floor and saw unconscious girls lying everywhere. Soho immediately told AM to get everyone up. He then proceeded to tell the head that he was just a habitual defaulter. And it turned out he was a hopeless, worthless thief. And surely the late master of the house would have been proud of him, don't you think? Bak immediately drew his sword and walked towards the guest. He immediately extended his sword straight to his head. Vilpin didn't like this and decided to engage him in combat, but the head stopped him with his hand. Soho told Boku that if he drew his sword, then let him attack. Or was he just trying to make small talk? Or is the thief waiting for him to start first? Bak was pissed off by this and he immediately attacked. But Soho dodged every punch he threw, including Bak was a little surprised by this. Soho tried not to stand out much and simply repelled the attacks. Bak was shocked that his attack was blocked. But Bak had heard that the second son of the Silver Sea Guild's second son was a top-notch fighter, but this guy was something else. Soho asked him what had happened. Did something not go according to plan? Bak smiled and replied that the guy would get it now then, and headed off to attack. But the young master dodged and answered him not to get his hopes up so high, and afterward told him to grit his teeth and strike hard from behind with his bat. Soho beat him for a few minutes and was even surprised that the bat had a very ringing sound. And he asked the thief, is his head completely empty? But it turned out that Bak had just passed out. And when he opened his eyes, he heard AM ask the master, is the thief dead? But Soho replied that he didn't hit him hard enough to kill him. AM punched him in the face and tried to bring him to his senses. But opening his eyes, he saw before him an old man who asked him if he was awake. Bak pushed him immediately to the side. X said the guy got scared just by looking at him. And now he thinks he's asking for another fight. Soho stood in front of him and told him to look. It wasn't the first or second time. How come he delayed payment for a year and yet annoyed people so much? They even tolerated it only out of respect for the master of the house. Or did Bak think they could be deceived? Bak asked the guy what kind of payment was he even talking about. But Soho wouldn't answer and threw the papers in his face. And said, here are the records of all the goods with which their Silver Sea Trade Guild supplied the house of the courtesans of Lothus. And it seems that the head has not paid a single coin for it. And according to the contract, it means that a transfer of ownership of the Lothus courtesan house must be made. Is that right? Bak looked at it and replied to him to cut the crap. The guy, what does he think? He doesn't recognize the fake. And now he's trying to pin it on him? And he knows all about their money pavilion fire. The fire burned up all the paperwork. So that's their method? Extort money without proof. AM got really angry and said that it was disgusting. But AK also replied that he too could not take it anymore. Soho dropped the bat and asked the thief what kind of forgery he was talking about. Soho threw the bat and asked the thief what kind of forgery he was talking about. And why does he see aged paper and time-worn printing? Or is he imagining it? What's he going to do if it's not a fake? Bak realized it's authentic. And he doesn't realize anything. After all, he had heard them talking about the loss of all the documents perfectly well. Had Dawn's Trade Guild really screwed up? But he remembers that they said the job was done, so how were they able to lie to him? Why the hell not? But then Soho started gritting his teeth. Bak raised his head and asked him what he was doing. Soho asked him what it sounded like. That's the sound Bak makes when he's trying to think. And if he ran a house of Lothus courtesans properly, he could live comfortably. And how desperate was he to go to all this trouble? And Bak must be used to littering behind other people's backs. Or is he wrong about him? Suddenly Seo came in and said he had something to say. Soho looked at him and immediately remembered him. Soho introduced himself and said he was the manager of the Lothus courtesan house. And Soho realized that he was the one who had turned a faltering business around. And to one of the top 3 courtesan houses in Hubei thanks to his outstanding management skills. And to think that such talent has been missing from the Lothus courtesan house all this time. Soho replied that it was nice to meet him too. Seo got right down to business and said they would drop the formalities. And asked the gentleman to look at this book. He hands him the ledgers of the Lotus courtesan's house and has him open to page 7. A new branch has recently come into existence. Bak got angry and yelled at Seo that he was a bastard. And if he said one more word, he could kiss his life goodbye. But AM immediately came up behind him and put her cold sword to his head. And Bak was silent at once. Seo turned to the young master and asked if he would allow him to talk to Master Beck for a bit. Seo didn't refuse and allowed it. Seo walked up to Bak and told him to stop, and that would be the end of it. Bak didn't understand what was going on, what he was talking about. But Seo said the chapter had gone too far. Seo realized that Bak, unlike the previous head of the house, had very mediocre abilities. The people in the house were already saying that young Master Bek had made another mistake in ordering, and what time was it already? And of course, he had the face of a former leader, but not the brains. Seo saw that Bak was constantly being compared to his father. Even small mistakes were considered serious blunders. And maybe that's what made all the difference. Bak started to panic and said he didn't do it on purpose. And those arrogant assholes just talk about dad. How does Seo think he's gonna stay in his place forever? And fate just forced him to break. And he knew he could never be like him, and yet he kept clinging to the past. A waste of time and effort. And now Master Bek will be held accountable for what they've done. That got angry and was greatly distressed. But Seo told young Master Eun to look through the ledgers mentioned earlier. Soho accepted such gratitude from him and realized that Seo was a very good man. And I could see perfectly well that Seo had his reasons. But it's all taken care of now. Just as he suspected, something illegal. And it turns out Bak was running an underground gambling house. It's no wonder why the brothel was in such a state and why they were behind on their payments. The head asked his son, had he discovered something? Soho replied that he had. And as expected, the money went for something else. And anyway, he's grateful to his father for trusting him. He started this whole thing, so he thinks he should follow through. The head replied to his son that he had done very well. And then Soho said that there was another suspicious detail, and would the father like to take a look? The head responded that there is no need. He also has the information. And is the son referring to the new pavilion that Chief Bek built? But at first he thought it was just a rumor. But now he realizes it might be true. And apparently Dawn's Trade Guild is behind it all. Along the way, Soho thought and knew that the Dawn Trade Guild was connected to the White Sky Trade Guild, which in turn was directly subordinate to the Murim Alliance. And what was the alliance up to this time, Soho wondered. Suddenly AM turned to the master and asked what he had been thinking about so deeply since morning that he was not even responding. Soho came to his senses and apologized to her. But AM asked why would he go to the pavilion, and let him explain at least something so that she could help in case of anything. Soho replied to her that he wasn't sure. In his head, he apologized to her because he needed to figure out what was wrong himself. AM thought she was going to hit him once. But Seo suddenly said that this is the pavilion that Master Bek is building. And contrary to his expectations, a perfectly ordinary pavilion, said Soho. But the air is suspiciously cold. Soho asked AM if she had noticed anyone around. She replied that no, she had not noticed anything. Soho confided in her and said they would go inside then. Once inside, Soho said that no one was here as orders had been given not to enter until tomorrow. And he had also noticed something strange here before. But Soho suddenly told Seo to stand behind him. Soho grabbed his sword and told his guest to get out. When he saw her, he realized that her presence was almost imperceptible. Soho asked her who she was, and let her tell him her name. But when he saw her draw her sword, he knew she wanted to fight. Soho told AM to take care of Manager Seo. But suddenly the enemy immediately swung his sword at him. Soho immediately dodged and felt that she was fast, and began to fend off her attacks. The enemy wasn't easy or even weak, but Soho was doing a fine job of dodging it. He noticed that she moved easily and her sword strokes were very strong. And she's a master. As they looked into each other's eyes, Soho smelled the pungent scent of orchids. But then AM stepped into the battle and told the young master to move away. The mercenary simply took advantage of this moment and exited the room and threw an incendiary bomb inside. Soho immediately told everyone to get down, and immediately the bomb exploded inside the pavilion. Soho asked the manager if he was okay. Seo replied that he was fine. Soho was surprised, for he thought it was an incendiary bomb, but it turned out to be a smoke bomb. And her goal was simply to escape, and they'd have a hard time if she'd shown what she could do. Suddenly, Seo told the master to take a look. And he doesn't know why Master Bek did it, but it's an underground passage that leads to the main building of the Lothus courtesan house. Soho noticed at once that the underground passage hidden under the floor was very strange. Soho asked AM if she would guard the entrance. AM immediately replied that she understood. But the master thought the girl in the mask must be connected to this. Opening the entrance, he said that what his father had said was true. And it's Dawn's Trade Guild rower. And his father was smarter than he'd ever imagined. The next day, at the main residence of the Silver Sea Trade Guild, the head gathered with his son and the chief inspector. The head said an underground tunnel leads to a road connecting to the Lothus courtesan's house, and the son said he found the Crest of Dawn's Trade Guild there. AK decided to speak up and told the head that if it bothered him so much, maybe just put the courtesan's house up for sale? Soho immediately replied that there was no need to do that. AK asked why not? The guy replied that as they know, the Lotus Courtesan House is one of the 5 most famous escort pavilions in all of Hubei, and it's a place frequented by the wealthy, elite, and high-ranking officials. And that means they will often have the opportunity to connect with them and earn their favor. The head also said that, in addition, they would be able to get valuable information quickly. Not to mention that they would also be able to distribute their trade guild's goods there. Continued Ak. Soho agreed with him and said that it was like this. If they kept the current general manager, they wouldn't even have to make much effort. Everything will run smoothly. In the long run, it's a net benefit. Ak replied that he too completely agreed with him, and after looking at the ledgers, he realized that he really had outstanding abilities, and in such a way that he immediately wanted to take him in and put him to work. And suddenly he felt a strange chill. Soho said it was only subtle, and he saw a frightening look in AKA's face. But the head said that in any case, Soho had handled the situation very well. As a token of his gratitude, he would grant him a leave of absence. And the money pavilion situation wasn't easy for him either. Let him rest easy for a few days. But when he saw the look in AKA's eyes, he knew he couldn't rest. But the head said he would deal with the inspector so he could go. Walking out of the room, Soho said it gave him the shivers. And AK is like a ghost that died of overwork. AM was suddenly behind him and asked, had there been a ghost in the pavilion? Soho replied that no, and they should be on their way. But AM thought, what kind of ghost talk from a young master? Soho saw that in his past life, the high-ranking officials were friendly to the Murim Alliance and Bekboku. And probably just because they were recruited in that secret place, and now it belongs to him and no, their trade guild. And they totally had those alliance assholes wrapped around their finger. And if only they'd caught that girl in the mask, they could have found out more. Suddenly Soho suggested to AM that they should not tell their father about what had happened at the pavilion. There was no point in worrying him unnecessarily. But he realized that the girl in the mask, she was a martial artist incomparable to the head of House Beck. And if they ever have to fight the Murim Alliance face-to-face, they will probably face battles with even stronger opponents. And he, too, should visit his teacher from a past life, and perhaps even today. And if he had only hurried his patrol that day, even if only for a couple hours, his son would still be alive. Suddenly Soho asked AM, what is the date today? Suddenly he realized that it was today. Running into the forest, Soho told himself that he couldn't be late. Today the teacher's eldest son would die in an accident. And it will happen in this very bamboo forest. Soho told AM that he would go first and have her follow the doctor. He knew the tragedy that had happened while all the adults were on duty. No one expected that the eldest son, playing with his younger brother in this bamboo grove, would fall and be pierced to death by a bamboo shoot. Suddenly Soho heard the cries of a child who was addressing his brother. The younger one was holding his brother's wound and asking what should he do? Junior was badly frightened and was crying out for help. Soho realized he was too late and could not save him. Junior apologized to his brother and said it was his fault, and if only he hadn't wanted to play in the woods. But then Soho came up to him and told him it wasn't his fault. He had only come because of his call for help. Junior couldn't calm down and was still crying, but Soho told him that he had done well. Just then Ace came in with the doctor in hand and told him to try to save the boy. Soho tried to calm the boy down and told him everything was fine. Immediately afterward, they went to the Silver Sea Trade Guild's medicinal pavilion. Soho realized that the penetrating wound was from a bamboo sprout, and if they were even a little late, the outcome would be dire. And maybe in this life he'll see the smile on his teacher's face a little more often. But the pain in the heart of parents burying their children he doesn't even want to imagine. And so he's going to change the future one piece at a time. Nevertheless, it's about time he showed up. Just then the teacher burst into the room shouting his child's name. Soho expected the teacher to have returned from his mission. Soho introduced himself to him and said that he was from the Silver Sea Trade Guild. And while walking through the bamboo forest, he was lucky enough to meet him and bring him here. The master thanked Soho and said he was very grateful to him. And if it had not been for the master, a disaster would have happened. Soho replied that there was no need to say that, he was just lucky to stumble upon them. And his youngest son stayed with his brother and stopped the blood. And it was his youngest who saved his brother. The teacher told the master that he was so humble and he didn't even know how he could repay him. Soho answered him not to worry about it. He was meant to live, no need to be so thankful. Soho didn't really expect to see the teacher like this. But suddenly the teacher looked at the boy's hands and noticed something. The teacher turned to him and asked, "Is it okay if they step back?" Soho asked, "Is something wrong?" The teacher replied that it did not seem right to him to say it here. It has to do with the nature of his body. Heading into the forest, the master said that he apologized to him that they had to come here so late and even without guards. Soho replies that it's fine, and he assumes the teacher wouldn't want others to hear what he was about to say. The teacher turned around and told the young master that he was smart. Soho thought suddenly, could it be that the internal energy from the crystal clear snow plum had changed his body? And the teacher must have sensed it. The teacher told the young master that he must have heard about the spiritual harmony of the star dragon before. And when he saw his face, he realized he'd guessed. But he told the guy he didn't have to worry. And when he touched his hand earlier, he felt a very powerful energy within him. He immediately realized it since he had studied the ice art himself. That was also when he felt that he possessed the spiritual harmony of a star dragon. Soho asked him if he knew anything about it. The teacher replied that he had met someone with that nature once before. Soho was surprised and asked, did he mean someone with the same condition as him? The teacher replied that this was correct, but he can't say who it is. And he is very sorry. Soho said that he dares to assume that he has his reasons. The teacher replied that anyway, the reason he had brought him here, he wanted to know if he was willing to learn the ice arts known to him. Soho already realized that everything was leading up to this, but he feigned surprise. The teacher said, considering he'd saved his son, and their meeting also possesses the spiritual harmony of the star dragon, it seems to him that it is fate. That's how he would like to repay him for all he has done for him, and so might the young master allow him to train him. Soho realized in his head that he was truly sorry. Everything is going so smoothly that he's having trouble holding back a smile. Soho agreed and asked him to train him. The teacher was surprised and said that he did not expect the young master to agree so quickly. Soho replied that the Prosperity Organization earned a howling trust, a long-standing relationship with their guild, and he would never turn down the opportunity to learn from one of its leaders. The teacher listened to him and said that if so, they would begin their training from tomorrow morning. The next morning, Master told him that this spiritual technique was called the Divine Ice Great in Divine Art. And the internal energy is already circulating in his dantian. All that remains is to memorize the current flow and reproduce it yourself. The teacher immediately put his hand on his back and decided to try to reproduce it himself. But Guru felt something strange, for the young master's meridians had already been opened. The teacher asked the young master, does he already know about this spiritual technique? Soho smiled and replied that there was no such thing. But in fact, Soho had already forgotten that he had opened all his meridians. But Master asked if there had been a time when his life had been threatened by his energy. Soho replied that actually he had eaten a miracle cure not too long ago and it had almost finished him off. He realized he wasn't lying to the teacher almost, and it was really hard for him. The teacher said that already explained everything. And they say this spiritual technique was invented in ancient times, when their ancestors were in danger of dying because of the cold, and the instinct of self-preservation awoke in them. And it looked like something similar had happened to him. Soho felt he didn't like lying, but he couldn't tell the truth, and he thought it would be hard for him to accept. The teacher put his hand on his shoulder and said that it was a good sign, since he was already ready to use the spiritual technique. And they can go straight to endurance and strength training and start right now. Soho was surprised and asked, right now? The teacher replied that yes, he would drive him so far that the young master would beg for mercy. After all, he had saved his son's life, so he would do everything he could to make sure his lessons helped him keep his own. That afternoon, Soho immediately began serious training, in which he worked on balance. He realized that he just had an endless cycle of work and training. But Master told him that he was going to give him homework every day, and he would practice even at work. But on his upcoming vacation, he's going to just lie in bed and do nothing else. Suddenly Yen walked into the inspector's office and said they had a guest. AK asked what kind of guest had come, and can't she see that he's very busy? But Eun said it's Mr. Sun. The inspector immediately stood up and said that was different. But Ing asked the young master, what is he doing? Let him prepare immediately. Soho asked, is he going with the inspector? AK replied that if Mr. Sun was here, it meant he had something to discuss with him, and usually that would threaten even more paperwork. And his desk is already cluttered, so Soho will take care of the paperwork on the matter, if he personally discusses everything with him and then retells it to him. But it's going to be a real pain in the ass. It will be a waste of time and not effective at all. Soho realized that the inspector was instructing him to do everything because he was too lazy himself. But AK told Yen to make sure the young master was okay, and he will give her more work when he returns. Yen was shocked by what she heard and didn't want to work. Yen immediately tied up the young master while simultaneously replying to the teacher that she had heard everything. Arriving at the room, Mr. Sun told the inspector that they had not seen each other for a long time. Song was a landowner of Chong'an County, Hubei Province. He said that indeed. However, what happened? AK told him to just forget about him. He is his employee and works for him. Sun said he was here to ask for his help anyway. The head asked him if there was a problem. Sun replied that breaching days ago, officials informed him that some of his land had not been taxed. And he talked to the trustees and they told him that officials were looking for something. And it looks like there's been a misunderstanding. He thought if he found what they were looking for, he could at least meet with them and clear things up. And the thing you're looking for is a doll that dances by itself at certain times. Soho was shocked to hear of such a doll. The head said it's definitely a doll that dances on its own, but at the end he couldn't help himself and started laughing. But he said that he understood Lord Sun's situation. However, is the Angsa official really the one who requested this item? Sun replied that the truth is that Lady Chu is involved. But the head said he was sorry to say, but he didn't think they could take it on. Soho immediately realized that Lady Chu's special game had become popular among the noble ladies at some point. And once a month, they would choose a young girl and take turns giving her a task of some sort of challenge, which was to obtain rare items. And sometimes they said to bring a golden flower. The loser was obliged to organize a sumptuous feast for all the other participants of the game. But the winner was rewarded with honors, as if she were an empress until the next round began. And the woman who invented and organized this game, Lady Chu, Pachang's wife, and what started out as a passing amusement, turned into a mad competition that harmed even the common people. And at the time he couldn't understand why they had become so obsessed with such a minor amusement. And now he thinks he understands. Sun was loaded and said he had been unfairly slandered. And he swears to heaven he's never done anything shameful in his whole life. And yet they say he hasn't paid taxes on a few acres of land. Does that even make sense? But if he had that rare item, he could directly approach the Cheongsa official and clear up this misunderstanding. And so he begs them to help him. Soho immediately wondered if his past life could be the reason why so many landowners, including Mr. Suna, had been ruined by tax evasion. And even taking her own life, the one who ended up taking her own life was Lady Chu. Lord Sun had long been familiar with their Silver Sea Trading Guild and was highly respected among the commoners. And if they help him now, he is sure Sun will thank them many times over for their kindness. However, it was too dangerous to contact Lady Chu at this moment. Soho's mind was clouded with his own and he didn't understand what he was thinking, and why their trade guild had met such an ignominious end, which he decided to do by going back in time. Soho immediately stood up and tried to address his father. But in his head he realized that he must never forget it. AK walked over and untied the young master. But Sun didn't understand what was happening and realized that he was kind of a slave. Soho said he had something to report, and this rare gimmick he's going to try to get it. He knew that the real name of this item Lord Sun had mentioned was a puppet that danced by itself. And in his past life, the master that did this was from the Golden Immortal Village in Jiangxi Province. And if he makes inquiries, he may be able to find him somehow. And most importantly, avoid direct conflict with Lid Chu. Soon the emperor issues a decree that puts an end to the game of noble ladies. And when that happens, Lady Chu's atrocities will also finally stop. And as long as he stays away, everything will be fine. Suddenly AM came to him and asked him what all this meant. Out of the blue, whenever he's going somewhere, he just tells her where and when. That's all she's asking him to do now. He didn't say a word until yesterday and now he's suddenly going to Jiangxi province. And with all the snow, the roads are very dangerous. Soho replied that he thought it was about time he took up a trade expedition as well. And this errand was very important for their trade guild. His father and the others had already given their approval, and even his older brothers had given him gifts and wished him well. Am left all this and said that since it was dangerous, she would now prepare her sword. But suddenly she saw the servant's face and asked why he was grinning like that. Palgak replied that this was young Master Soho's first official expedition. And come to think of it, the young master he serves has grown so much. He is both nervous and excited at the same time. But Money Pavilion warrior Lim told Am's bodyguard that this is the way it is. And she shouldn't worry. He is much more mature and capable than he looks. And O2 will be helping the young master to make sure the mission goes quickly and with dignity. And even their inspector you said that the young master should be returned as soon as possible. Am replied that the inspector gave good advice. But Lim said that somehow this expedition was accompanied by the chief guard Guak from the Prosperity Agency. And Captain Chong Chun of the Silver Wind Squadron. Even if something were to happen, there was no reason to worry. Unless they ran into bandits or something. Suddenly Soho realized that the warrior had just guessed. Soho walked outside and asked what was wrong. When he turned around he saw a huge man with scars on his face standing in front of him. The guy said he hadn't seen his old acquaintances in a long time. It's been a long time. Chong Chun asked the guy, is he okay? The guy replied that judging from the direction they were going, they seemed to be heading to Jiangxi province. Chong replied that's correct. They are transporting goods that need to stay dry. All the snow is slowing them down and everyone is pretty tired. But Guy said it was good news for them. And the head of their fortress sent them an invitation to stop for a sip of warm tea and rest. Soho immediately realized that these were the Green Forest Bandits. In this neighborhood, this person must be around somewhere. On arriving in the town, they were met by the chief and sitting down at a huge table of food said he was for the sake of welcoming them all. And introduced himself that he was Zhang Desu, the head of the fortress on Mount Wudong. Chun also introduced himself in response and said that he was the captain of the Silver Wind Squad of the Silver Sea Trade Guild. Guan Menheng also introduced himself and said that he was the head of the Prosperity Agency. Su replied that he was worried that they might get frostbite because of the crappy weather, so he invited them today. Ian thanks them for coming despite the unexpected invitation. Chan replied to him that it was they who should thank them. They were in desperate need of a vacation and it came out just perfect. And saw in Su that he was just as good a man as ever, and completely unsuited to be the head of the bandits. Su laughed and said that made him happy. Then they should eat before the food and tea got cold. Palgak asked the AM bodyguard, right now aren't they in the very den of brigands? Why is everyone so calm? But Soho replied to him that not all brigands and pirates attack trade groups or security agencies. In his day, bastards who started a battle without a plan were quickly wiped out from the route. And anyway, usually if you follow conditionally approved roads, you can travel with no problems. But AM looked at the gentleman and asked what was it that he said in his time as if he had experience? Isn't this his first journey? Soho replied that it was what his brother had told him, and said that it was very important advice. In any case, this deliciousness would soon get cold, so they'd better get started. Soho felt that the tea was actually really good, and it's quite costly to drink such a thing in winter. Do they have enough money for something like this? But suddenly Su said that they didn't look like those who usually travel. But Soho replied that he was a little confused and had completely forgotten to introduce himself. Soho introduced himself and said that he worked in the money pavilion of the Silver Sea Trade Guild. Su asked the young master what was his relationship with the guild leader. Soho replied that it was his father. Su laughed and said that it was no wonder he had such clear eyes. And he didn't know they had such important guests. And let him quickly sit down and enjoy his meal. But Soho looked around a bit and he thought one of Su's men was strange. But Soho found it interesting that compared to their food, theirs is quite modest. And he doesn't think he's the type to neglect his family for guests. A fortress of this size and they are short of funds? And it is even strange, in a difficult situation they invite guests and treat them very generously. And even malnourished themselves, they want to charge more for the fare while not wanting to be aggressive, they nevertheless don't want to show that they are lacking something. And this man must not yet know what lies beneath the mountain. If he plays it well, Soho decided to approach the head of Su Fortress and asked, had they been in any trouble lately? Su replied to the young master that although he was sure that the master had made a mistake out of ignorance, but let him keep in mind, his words were just now extremely insulting to their fortress. Soho said, apologizing if he was offended. However, he doesn't need to react so harshly to it. And he doesn't think this fortress should cling to those who pass by and give them a lavish welcome not befitting its difficult situation, and to request a higher fee than usual. Here too, Guak was shocked and thought, how did the young master know about this? But then Su said that while everyone around them is pretending to eat to their heart's content. To summarize, he means to say that they are treating them to food in order to charge them a higher fee and pretend to eat enough. He got that right, didn't he? Soho asked back, isn't he right? Su couldn't stand nor fist and punched the table immediately. Bailiff. AM immediately felt a strange energy and thought that the young man had lost his mind. What are they going to do now? Su couldn't help himself and started laughing at the top of his voice. Everyone was shocked and looked at him without taking their eyes off him. Su said he apologizes for the lackluster game. He's absolutely right. Especially this winter, so much snow has piled up, it's definitely not a good year for the fortress. However, judging by the fact that they brought it up despite the possibility of being misunderstood, and they must have some kind of plan? Soho also noticed that Su was quite generous for the head of the bandits. And even in his past life, he did not consider him to be the kind of person who would spend his entire life engaging in criminal activities. Soho replied to him that of course he had everything, and it's a pretty simple and effective method. Su was surprised and told the young master that he was full of confidence. What kind of method is this? Soho replied before continuing, the head of the fortress, that sword, does it belong to him? And he seems to care for it a lot. Su replied naturally. For a martial artist, the sword is an extension of his body. Taking care of it is the basics. But what did that have to do with the method the young master was talking about? Soho replied that with what was said, was Mount Yuten still more important than this sword? Su said that this mountain is all he has. How can he say that? Soho asked him bluntly, why doesn't he care about her? Su asked, how does he not care yet? What is the young master talking about? Soho pointed his finger and replied, snow. Because of the snow, fewer people are coming and going. Isn't that the reason why they are collecting less tolls than usual? They've barely managed to get this far, considering they're few in number. Which means groups smaller than them won't even try. And if they get rid of the snow and clear the path, then it will benefit people because they won't have to go around the mountain. And they will be able to collect more tolls, which is fine. In the end, each side will end up with a win-win. Besides, you could increase the toll by arguing snow clearing and they would be understanding. Su was surprised and replied that he had somehow not looked on that side. People also said they didn't even think about shoveling snow. And it looks like an educated young master came out. But one of the people asked why their head had not thought of it himself. But they told him not to say that, or he'll get it. Su stood up and said that he was ashamed to confess. But he had not even thought of such a possibility. He was ashamed that he had behaved so boldly before realizing it. And he is indebted as a chief to the young master. And maybe he has a wish? Soho was surprised at such a suggestion. He asked the head of the fortress if they could talk in private. Because there is something that would be very helpful and to them. He has an extremely curious story. After climbing the mountain, Soho was shocked and said it was just a magnificent view. Su replied that it was the pride of their fortress. He set up camp here because he fell in love with this landscape. Especially in winter. When the snow covers everything in white as it does now, it's breathtaking. More importantly, since he'd asked to talk in private, he felt it was something important. And how about we say it now? Soho asked the head how much he knew about spirit plants. Su replied that he didn't know that much, honestly. What's the young master's point? Soho remembered that this had happened 5 years before his death. Rumors began to spread about the spiritual herbs growing on Mount Yuten. And soon, the Murim alliance swept through Zhang Fortress, monopolizing the cultivation of spiritual herbs on the mountain in a short time. However, at this point, the alliance was not even aware of their existence. Soho turned to the head, said that it was true that here on Mount Yuten, precious spiritual herbs grow everywhere. And now, near their right foot, a bluish flower. They call it the snow soul flower, a great remedy to heal the organs. and on the other side is a flower that expels negative energy from the body, the white tiger spirit flower, and there are also those that help the body absorb medicine more efficiently, such as snow ginseng. And there are countless spiritual plants blooming on this mountain. Su asked the master how he knew this information. Soho replied that a merchant selling various goods, a basic knowledge of herbs and an understanding of the area is necessary. Doesn't he think so? Su said that it was rare for even a merchant to recognize spiritual herbs with a single glance. Soho replied that the details were a trade secret and they could just imagine that he wasn't the most common merchant. And he can't really say that he knows the future. Su looked at the young master and said that his guts were not thin. So what is his request in the end? Soho replied that he was asking the chapter to sell the plants exclusively to only them and to keep the deal secret. The head thought about it and said it could be arranged. But why in secret? Soho replied that because if they were found out it would be a headache for both of them. They may face competition with other trade guilds, and they will have to guard these lands from thieves. The head said that was also true. These herbs are quite unusual. Outside interference could create a problem. And like those thieves who do all sorts of evil things under the guise of righteousness. And then Soho thought, is the chapter about the Murim alliance? Soho told him that if they made a deal, not only would they buy herbs from them for a decent price, but they would also provide them with documents that would help them distinguish spiritual herbs from ordinary plants. Will the head accept their proposal? After shaking hands, Su said that he agreed. He would trade with the Silver Sea Guild. Soho thanked the head and asked if they could go back and sign the contract. Su replied to the guy that he can see how squeamish he is until the very end. Soho said that a contract is the foundation of a good deal, and the chapter might even agree with that. Suddenly entering the room, Soho saw them looking at him strangely and all running in his direction. He immediately shouted for them to stop. Palgak hugged the master and said he had been talking for so long and they thought something had happened to him. Soho asked, "What's all the fuss about?" Chan came up behind the young master and told him he was fine. And well, it was all right. And even considering it was his request, letting him go alone, unaccompanied, was extremely worrisome. Soho replied that really he was fine. If there was something wrong, he would not have requested a face-to-face meeting. Suddenly, Su walked into the room and said that everyone had made too much noise. And the young master is stronger than they all think. And even among those present, his skills are top-notch. Chan turned around and didn't understand what the head was saying. The head said for everyone to listen to him carefully. Starting today, they are accepting Soho from the Silver Sea Trading Guild as an honored guest and treating him with respect. They should therefore show him and his companions exceptional hospitality. And he doesn't want to be known as the shameless man who collected a toll from the man who saved his life. And let him mean. Soho tells AM that he can't just walk away after what he got. And if the head is uncomfortable accepting them, let him not consider it a toll. Better yet, an advance on the deal they made today. Su asked the young master, does he really need to win everywhere? But so be it, and he would gladly accept them. After giving the advance, Soho said that considering they were in a hurry, it was time to hit the road. The head already thought that the youngest son of the Silver Sea Trading Guild, despite looking so young, was brave and intelligent, and reminded him of an old friend that day he had asked him to come to his senses. And was he going to die a senseless death? He may not even dream of revenge. He just needs to go into hiding. From now on, he'll have to hide his fighting skills from them, which means he'll have to change his weapons as well. And let him live no matter what happened. And now that he's met a young boy as brave as his friend, he is unable to keep himself from remembering the past. And even though he'd told him not to dream of revenge, how could he live with the shame of abandoning him and their family? He can't fix anything, but I wonder how far this young man will go that he resembles him so much. But suddenly Soho opened his eyes and didn't realize what world he was in, for the surroundings were closed. But turning his head to the side, he saw a doll lying nearby that was broken into small pieces. But he wondered, why is there a doll here? He also noticed that there was someone else. Nearby, a child was kneeling and mourning the death of his parents. He approached the child and asked if he was okay. The child immediately turned around and grabbing him by his shirt replied that this time he was asking him to save her. Soho came to his senses from such fear and opened his eyes, started screaming in the room. Palgak stood in front of him and asked the young master, is he all right? But then AM came running and asked the young gentleman, was he having a nightmare? Soho replied that it was fine. Just a bad dream. But it was actually a nightmare. And he needs to find that kid now. And if he doesn't make it in time. But AM said that lately, the Lord has been sparing no effort at all to find this master. Soho replied that they probably would. But if it works out, they'll be in the black. And so they're going to try to find the doll's creator again today. And today is the third day since he arrived at the village of Golden Immortality. And he is grateful to Master and Captain Chong-chun for allowing him to move freely. But he hadn't found that master yet. According to confirmed information, he was living here in the Golden Immortal Village at that time. And there was even a clue that he lived in a house with a paulownia tree. And I thought it wouldn't be hard to find. But here and even here only paulownia trees grow. And he was already thinking that he should take a better look around. But then he turned back and noticed that he was being followed. He understood that as soon as the rumor that he had arrived at the Golden Immortal Village spread, he would incessantly have someone on his tail. They fear the Silver Sea may disrupt their trade routes. AM told the young master that they were being followed again. Soho replied that it looked like it, and it was understandable but still bothersome. And he is so anxious to find any clue that can lead to the doll's creator. And he thought he should start dealing with them. Soho turned to Palgak and said that there seemed to be a lot of interesting things in this market. Palgak replied that even though they see them every day, they still find something new. And then maybe they'll take a walk that way today, said Palgak. Soho replied to him that it sounded great. The boys immediately took their own way and started running. M was surprised and shouted for them to wait for her, and there was no need to fly like that. Stopping to rest, Soho saw that they had dashed across the market to get rid of the pursuit. AM said it looks like they broke away. Palgak asked if they were being chased. Soho answered him that they wouldn't just blow up. Palgak asked the young master, did he know too? Soho replied that he did. But suddenly nearby he heard someone shouting to the thief. The vendor ran after the thief, shouting that his family would starve without it. Soho watched the thief to the last as he ran in their direction. He took one apple from Palgak and said he would borrow it for a second. He used the divine art of the Ice Sea of Gradine. And it's a technique that allows you to store energy most efficiently. His teacher had told him that when Soho gained experience, he would be able to power even objects within energy. Soho decided to try this on an apple, and freezing it a bit he threw it with all his might right at the thief. The apple hit with great speed right in front of the thief, and on which he stepped and flipped over the loot. The thief plopped down and asked who left it on the ground. Soho immediately approached him and asked him to return the wallet. Palgak has already prepared his fists and says that this thief is so bad. The thief did not argue and immediately handed over the sack. Soho took the sack and handed it to the owner. The man was so casual that he thanked the boy for such an act. Soho said they would take the man to the guards and he could be free to go. The man was shocked and asked the gentleman, is that okay? Maybe they could come over and have some tea? After all, he would feel terrible if he let his savior leave without thanking him. Soho replied that it was no big deal, everything was fine, and you don't need to call him your savior. But the man's eyes just shone bright and Soho agreed and said they'd come in for a cup. Upon arriving home, the man was hospitable and told his guests to come in, and they lived very modestly. But Soho replied that on the contrary, they had a very nice and cozy place. Suddenly the children ran out of the house and ran to their father. The man hugged his children and asked if they had a good time. He turned around and told the guests that they were his children, and he told them to go up to their uncle and say hello. In the moment, Soho began to remember the house with the paulownia tree, and it was the same child he'd seen in his dream. Soho pondered and said, could it be that he was really the doll maker he was looking for? AM asked if they could just ask him if he knew how to make dolls. The master thought about it and replied that there is nothing like a direct approach. He strangely resembled a child he had seen in a dream. Suddenly the door opened and the guy came in and told the guests that they were waiting for him. And he apologizes, unfortunately he can't offer anything better for such distinguished guests. Soho asked the man, so he didn't apologize. This tea has a rich, full-bodied flavor. He's quite impressive. And he's grateful. But the man remembered and said, on second thought, he never introduced himself. He lives here in the village of Golden Immortality. And he makes pottery. And his name is Gongdui. And he thanks them again for their help. Soho replied that everyone would do that in his place. If they continued, he would feel uncomfortable. And speaking of which, may he ask him what his children's names are? Dewey replied that his eldest son's name was Gong Mil, and his daughter's name was Gong Ray. Soho understood and said that it was time for him to introduce himself too. And after introducing himself, he thanked the guy for his welcome. Gong suddenly said that Soho seems to him to be a person of considerable importance, yet he shows interest in his insignificant situation, and he is really embarrassed. Soho replied that not at all. Compared to him, a mere merchant, he is a father that is raising 2 children, worthy of much more admiration. And he's not all that experienced at it, but he's heard that raising children is like running a government. Gun replied that indeed, not an easy task at all. He often felt sorry for his children for not being able to give them more. Soho said he might sound presumptuous, but seeing the children radiant and cheerful, he would say they had already done quite a bit. Soho looked at the boy's toy and asked, "Did they make this?" The girl replied that her brother had made this thing. And he made a bunch of other stuff. Soho immediately recognized it as a self-propelled tank. A bit crude compared to the ones he'd seen in his past life, but still. A wagon that starts moving on its own when they turn the gears and put it on the ground. But they were popular with rich kids. And something like this could be done by a child. Soho realized that in that case, he told the kids that it was really impressive. And asked the kid if he happened to have crafted anything else. The boy was shy to tell. But the girl immediately told him that he had made more sculptures. The girl immediately ran and brought one wooden doll and showed it to the guests. Soho immediately saw that this was it. Compared to the intricate doll he remembered, this one was rather rough. But since he's just at the beginning of his journey, this level of work is probably expected of him. The girl tried to install the missing parts and asked her brother why it wasn't moving. The guy replied that apparently it had to do with the durability of the parts inside the doll. Earlier, when he turned this gear, the bubble from the fish inside created elasticity and the doll moved on its own. But it's made from discarded materials from the market. That's probably why it broke down quickly. Soho asked the guy if he had the right materials, could he make that doll again? Gun told the guest that this guy is good at making these things. He's talented, but so far his skills aren't making money. And he just entertains the neighborhood kids and his little sister. Soho asked with surprise, not bringing in any money? But told Master Gong that his son's talent was a gift from heaven and his skills could definitely bring great wealth. Gong asked what other riches? Soho answered him that the items Mill creates are rare and unique. And if you make them into a marketable item and put them up for sale, the price will be high. Gong said that it is the merchants who make the money, not the artisans who make these things. Artisans like him, without power and connections, are just used. As they say, a bear takes risks, a peddler trades in honey. Soho noticed that his views were more pessimistic than he had expected. If this continued, Master Gun and his entire family might be enslaved. And if he wishes to change their tragic fate, and after thinking about it, he made a decision. And he asked Master Gong what share does he get from the sale of his pottery. Gun replied that he wasn't sure, but probably less than 10%. But Soho told him bluntly if he let him contract with Mill, he would give him 40% of the profits. And this is on the condition that he joins the Silver Sea Trade Guild workshop. Gong asked in surprise, 40%? But why is he offering his child so much? And his trade guild whatever. Either way, he needs time to think it over. Soho realized that this was what he expected and it was impossible. He told Master Gong that the matter was serious, so let him think it over properly. But Soho realized there was no rush. It would leave him alone with his thoughts for now. He thanked the master for the tea. And said he plans to return to Hubei the day after tomorrow or the next day. Until then he will stay at the Einen guest house. And when the master has made up his mind, let him come to him. Gong replied that he would do so. On the way, AM asked the master, was this boy exactly the doll maker he was looking for? And why is he so glum? Soho realized that because even though he wanted to help them, he had no good reason to do so. And so far, nothing had happened yet. At this time, in the Walnut Oak Trading Guild, the head said that he had heard that they were unable to get the monthly tribute into Master Gong. The guy replied that he apologized, as the saying goes, if you're unlucky you can break your nose, even falling on your back. And the guy he assigned the task to ended up being caught escorting a third young master from the Silver Sea Trade Guild. However, he had already taken extra measures, so there shouldn't be any problems. The head asked the guy, did he find out why that puppy from the Silver Sea had come here? The guy replied that they had been following him for days, but he had been just hanging around the village and the market all this time. The head said that he probably just wanted to gain experience in field work. But he heard that he went to see Master Gun today. The lad replied that Master Gong had apparently insisted on treating him to tea, saying that he could not let his benefactor go empty-handed. And he thinks it's just a coincidence, so there's nothing to worry about. And soon they'll make him sign a slave contract. The head said that arrogant bastard is trying to defect to another trade guild and betray them. And that's after they let him make a living all this time. And that's why you can't trust commoners. And if Master Gun continues to resist, have them bring him here. They will teach him a painful lesson so that he will know his place. That same evening, the master's wife asked him why he was sighing so heavily. Gun replied that he couldn't stop thinking about the man who had come to see them today. His wife asked him if he meant the gentleman who he said had helped return his wallet. Gun replied that yes, he did. He saw talent a mile away and even offered him a contract, and said he was offering 40% of the proceeds. But the more he thinks about the one who is easily offering such a large sum, the more suspicious his intentions seem to him. And he has been cheated so often in his life, he feels sorry for himself. He doubts even who helped him. The wife asked her husband, he doesn't take the words of this fraudster seriously. Does he? Still, up until now, the Walnut Oak Guild had allowed them to have food on the table, right? Goon asked her what she was talking about. Had she forgotten about how they had treated him all this time? She and he had decided they needed a new job when their contract was up. The wife replied that that was what they had decided, but now things had changed, and suddenly saw a bright light. Gun was shocked and said that it was a gold bar after all. Where did Honey get it from? The wife replied that she had recently met Huang Garin of the Walnut Oak Trade Guild by chance in the market. He gave it to her and said he could give it to her when their kids were older. They'll be well off for a while just by selling it. Isn't that great? While that gentleman looks suspicious, suddenly appears out of nowhere and offers 40% to commoners like them. Isn't that a scam? And they can't trust Mill to someone like him. Suddenly, someone came in unexpectedly and asked if Master Gun was home. Gong was shocked and thought, who did it bring at this hour? And opening the door, the master said that it looked like the master was still awake. But Gong wondered and asked what had brought them here? And what are the guards here for? The master replied to the master that he would never have thought of him that way. And no matter how tempting the money was, how could he encroach on the property of the trade guild? Gong asked them what they were talking about. The master replied that he didn't think the master could do that, and looking that he was still awake, apparently they were planning an escape that night. Gong's wife came out and asked, what kind of escape in the night? The master saw this and started shouting that this gold bar belonged to the Walnut Oak Trading Guild, and they are still going to deny it, even though the evidence is so obvious. Suddenly Milia woke up to loud screams and turned to his mother. The wife went up to the gentleman and said she was apologizing and she must have misunderstood. However, didn't he give it to her today and tell her to use it? The master wondered and asked if she had written proof, a contract confirming that she knew the funds from the guild. My wife was surprised and replied that it was the first time she had heard of it. And what is it anyway? Suddenly the master told her to stop. And this is a waste of time. And ordered the soldiers to take these thieves away at once. The soldiers grabbed Gun and his wife and dragged them to the pavilion. Gong asked Mr. Huang what this was all about. The girl heard her mother screaming and ran outside. But Huang put his hand in front of her and said they would just sign the contract. There's no need to go after them. And let her stay here and behave. They'll be back soon. But the girl fell to the ground and bit his leg. Huang got angry after that and raising his foot just tossed it aside. The blow was so strong that she flew back into the room and smashed the wall with her body. Milia immediately ran out and approached her. Huang said that parents are like children. They are all ignorant fools, no different from animals. And since they're beasts, and seeing Byung nearby asked, what's he up to? Byung walked up to the guy and put the knife on the table and said that it sucked. He held the knife out to him and told him to take it. For nothing in this world is as he wants it to be until he sheds blood. So if he is a man, let him attack him as if he were ready to die. Milia tried to pick up a knife, but decided to trick them at the end and ran out with his sister. Huang asked Byung, was he just going to let him go? The guy replied that children were not part of the deal. And if he wants him to do it, he should just pay extra. And why is he wasting his time in this redneck dump? Because that's what he's getting paid for, that's why. But lately it's all just been disappointing. And isn't there anyone here strong enough to entertain him? In the morning, Soho got the news that Mill had come to see them. And why was he alone and without his parents? And where did he go? Mill walked in with his sister and said hello to the young master. Soho asked him what had happened in the first place. Was he hurt and what happened? Milya couldn't help crying right in front of him, but he told everything. Soho listened and decided it was his fault, and no matter the reason, he should have put guards on them. Sitting down at the table, Soho said that he could see Ray getting better. Palgak replied that she was a very robust child. But then AM came in and said that Captain Chong-chun had personally summoned a healer, and he had treated her first. Luckily, it was just minor abrasions. She's fine. And Mill just got back, and he's fine too. And Mill says he has something to say to the gentleman. Mill replied to the gentleman that he said that because of his talent, he would be able to make a lot of money, right? And if that's the case, then he asks the young master to save his parents. No matter the cost, he will work hard and he will pay for everything. Soho was surprised and said it was impossible. Milja was surprised and didn't understand at first and apologized. Soho told the boy that he should be paid for his work, and wanting him to work with him for free, what does he take him for anyway? A useless leech? He'll draw up a fair contract with him and share the promised profits. And to do that, he needs his parents' consent, so of course they need to bring them here. Soho decided to save his parents and told Mill to stay here and take care of Ray. He would be back soon with his parents. And thanked the captain for looking after the children. The captain replied that he didn't have to. So their situation, he just couldn't turn a blind eye. And it's natural for a member of their Silver Sea Trade Guild. However, he can't spare many people to accompany him. And today is the day to meet with the Ocean Trade Guild, which was the original purpose of their mission. Soho replied that it was fine. They are not going to fight. They are just going to socialize with another trade guild. Chun said that he would assign 3 of the Silver Wind squad to accompany him just in case. He asked the young master to be careful. Soho thanked him for his concern and said they should leave then. But the head of Guak's guards stood in front of him. Guak handed him his sword and said that he hoped the sword wouldn't come in handy, but in case it did, let him use it well. Soho was surprised, for his teacher had not taught him any sword techniques yet. But he thanked him for the gesture. But suddenly, Soho heard Guak in person telling him to beware of a martial arts master from the Walnut Oak Trade Guild. They say he is known as a biome. Soho was shocked to hear the whispering technique for the first time. But Guak had told him never to let his guard down in the Murime. And when he comes back, that night they will continue his training. So there's no need to overdo it. Soho took his men with him and said now it's time to hit the road. Time to work. The head at this moment was asking Master Gong if he understood the situation he was in. His wife stole a walnut oak tree from the trade guild, and she stole a gold bar worth 1,000 coins. And according to their rules, they have to pay 5 times the damages as compensation. But of course they don't have that kind of money. Gong began to shout to the chapter, something they had already told him countless times. They hadn't stolen it. The head put the slave contract on the table and told him to stop being stubborn and sign it. But Gong asked the Lord if he was afraid of divine punishment. Even beasts behave more dignified than he who has a human face. Huang slapped Gun and said that the head's word is law here. The future slave dare not speak to his master like that. And as long as he's kind, he'd better listen. Huang beat Gung and even left abrasions on his face. The head calmed Huang down and said that they had agreed no violence, and he could settle it like civilized people. Can he imagine if this was reported to the authorities? His wife, his children would all be sold to an unknown harsh place. And wouldn't it be better to work for him instead? Gun replied that he meant all of this because he said he would be joining another trade guild at the end of the month. Is all this now being done because of that? The head replied that, frankly, even he no longer knew what he was talking about. And if he's gonna make it harder, so be it. They'll just turn them over to the authorities. And when they sell them into slavery, they'll learn their lesson through suffering. Many don't survive such harsh conditions and end their lives. Judging by his stubbornness, perhaps their children will endure more than others. Gong understood and asked the Lord for forgiveness. The head was surprised and said that he had gotten so old already. His hearing is not what it used to be. And Huang said they'll see who has the wrong ear. And he asked Gun, can't he even apologize properly? Gun dropped his head to the floor and replied that he was really apologizing. And he behaved without knowing his place. He'll sign a slave contract or whatever, only asking them to spare the children. The head immediately ordered the soldiers to let him go. Wouldn't it have been better to do that from the beginning? But some only understand strength. Suddenly, a door suddenly flew out and hit the head of the head. And then Soho came in and said that's right. Some people don't realize until they've been kicked to the curb. And it's some people like him. And actually he was really just going to talk. But now that they'd broken the door and stuff, it looked like they were going to have a little scuffle. Soho put the sword on the floor and asked who was first. The head came to his senses and asked Huang who the boy was. Huang replied that he was the youngest son from the Silver Sea Guild. The head was surprised and said that he was the Silver Sea puppy who had been hanging around the Golden Immortal Village for the past few days. Soho didn't even bother to hide it and said that the head had been watching him all this time. He knows everything about him. He doesn't need to follow him at all to know. The head got angry and started yelling at him that he was an insolent little puppy and let him watch his language. What could he possibly know? Soho replied to him that he was trash for tricking defenseless people into signing a slave contract. Also a beast driven by greed that gave up its humanity. Also a rather cowardly one, frightened at the mere mention of the Silver Sea Trade Guild and sending people to spy on them. It's because of people like him that make merchants look like crooks. And the head looks like a crook. They're lucky, because potential business partners will probably just say no just by seeing his face. But suddenly Soho asked, what if a pitifully bearded man like him confessed his feelings? AM replied that he would be warmed immediately with a bamboo stick. The head just lost his temper and ordered that they capture him immediately. The mercenaries immediately surrounded him and attacked. Soho stood still, for he knew that AM could handle them. AM smiled and said she hadn't warmed up in a while, and started beating up all the mercenaries around them. After finishing all the work, AM said that everything was ready. Soho suddenly said that now that they had cleaned up the garbage, maybe they could talk. The head started pushing his assistant and asked him what he was doing. Let him stop him. Huang replied to the master that he knew perfectly well that he could not fight after all. But the head got angry and told Byanga that that was what he had hired him for. Just then Byong appeared and asked the head, was he looking for him? Soho immediately sensed his presence. The head asked him where he'd been anyway, and was he going to work out his share? Byong asked with surprise, a share? But looking at the situation, it didn't look like he could pay a share either. The head got angry and asked him what he just said. Byong replied that they would change the terms if he paid 10 times the usual amount, he would get him out of it instantly. The head was shocked, but answered him that he agreed. Byong immediately started fighting and shouted to his enemies to dodge. But before the warriors could even turn around, their blood had already been spilled. But Palgak, out of fear, simply covered his head and did not want to see it all. But at the end he met Soho, who stopped his attack. He asked Byong how dare he? Byong replied to the guy that he could try to buy one too. The head asked his man, Byong won't lose to this puppy, right? Huang replied that despite his appearance, Byong is indeed a first-class martial artist. He is still young, so if he gets a good opportunity, he can reach the peak of the path one day. The head asks, what is the peak of the path? Is it that strong? Huang replied that countless martial artists spend their entire lives practicing, remaining only second-rate. But if he's first class, he's more than capable of leading a small sect. Huang asked the head what he thought. Does this puppy have any chance? The head immediately shouted to Byong to teach this arrogant brat the code of Murim. At this point, Soho was telling his enemy that he didn't think he needed it at all. If all he's worth is money, he'll do just fine on his own. But Billen said that spoiled majors better keep their mouths shut, or you could be seriously sorry. So he attacked him with his sword. But Soho dodged his attack. Bayan tried to finish him off in various ways, but each time Soho repelled his attacks. But suddenly Bayan picked the perfect moment and, seeing a loophole, launched his attack. But Soho immediately withdrew to a distance. Bijin said he thought the kid was just a loose cannon, and he thinks he's got something to show for it. But does he know that survival is not so easy in the Murim? Suddenly he threw a shell of liquid right at Soho. While flying, the bottle opened and the liquid went straight into his eyes. Soho immediately realized it was fire wine, and his eyes were burning and he couldn't even open them. And he wondered what should he do in such a situation. But he thinks there is a way, and was intensely angry about not being able to see anything, and an incredible discomfort enveloped him. And then he remembered the words of Guak, who said that the divine art of the great Eunhae Sea was a technique inspired by the icy breath of the Earth Sea. And its mysterious depths are like the ocean. And the more he grasps it, the more uncomfortable he becomes. and went around people with impure or dark energy such as those from a demonic cult or dark faction. But Soho replied that it didn't sound like much. In fact, it's the opposite. But Master said that this is a huge advantage. If someone is filled with lust for killing, he won't be able to hide it from his perception of energy. And at a certain level, he would even be able to sense their movements and locations. In his previous life, he had never been able to achieve this level of sensitivity. His teacher told him that at his current level he was likely feeling simple discomfort. And the stage right before the peak of the journey when he is still a first-class master. Once reached, he will begin to read his opponent's movements and stance. That's why you don't have to be lazy in your training. Once on the brink of life and death, this honed sensitivity to energy will be a weapon better than any blade. Soho turned to his inner energy and said he could feel it, though only a little. And because he practiced hard every day, he immediately sensed that the enemy was behind him, and it was a simple sword attack. But Soho automatically just reacted and dodged, and felt that the enemy was so fast that he almost missed. Byung asked the guy how he knew the attack would come from behind. Soho noticed that the enemy's sword-wielding remained at a basic level despite the powerful internal energy. Soho wiped his eyes and replied that he didn't know. If the enemy is so interested, maybe he should pay. Information isn't free, he realized, right? Byung got angry and looked at him like a victim. Palgak had told M's bodyguard that the bleeding wouldn't stop. What should he do next? AM asked him back, what does he think himself? Let him just clam up better. But the guys' bodies were just damaged and started to secrete fluid. And AM realized that they were short-handed. And looked at Goon and saw that they too were in a panic. But then turned her attention to the head and his assistant. AM told them to get over here quickly and help them stop the bleeding. The head and his assistant replied to the lady that they would help them right away and ran up. But Byung still tried to finish the boy off, but Soho was stronger than him and dodged. Soho suddenly said it was time to call it a day. Byung saw that this guy was dodging all his attacks as if he was predicting them. And he rejoiced greatly, for it had been so long since anyone had been able to entertain him. But then he dropped his sword and Soho asked the enemy, what is he doing? Is he surrendering? Byung replied that it was just the opposite. The reason why he used the sword was because he didn't want to stain his sex art with dirty work. And the young master of the Silver Sea Trade Guild, he recognizes his power. And now he will fight him for real. Soho replied, which is why the supposed martial arts master has such dim swordsmanship. Everything fell into place. Soho decided to do it too and shouted to Palgak to take his sword. M asked him what he had in mind. Soho introduced himself and said that he was from the Silver Sea Trade Guild, and since the enemy uses fists and palms, he will confront him with the martial art he learned. He still remembered that in his past life, martial arts was just a way to survive, and he thought that would never change. Soho approached him as a mentor and asked him to teach him something new. But Byung said he liked the kid, and he would show him a few moves. But Soho also already realized that things were different now. In this life, more than anything else, he wants to become much, much stronger than the past. Byung immediately picked up speed and used his stalking double fortune teller kick. But Soho took a step back and saw that his enemy's defiant demeanor had disappeared without a trace. And his martial art is real. And in battle, everything becomes clear. And he is definitely superior to this youngster, so how does he reflect all of his blows, Byung thought? And why can't he even hit it? His eyesight is no better. He hasn't studied the arts of his sect. But just how he could fend it all off. Soho took a moment and drove his fist into the enemy's head with a straight punch. Byung immediately recalled his memories. And when he was alone, he thought he was going to die. But all of a sudden he was told by a guy that his look was one that a kid shouldn't have. A lost child, if he doesn't want to die here, why not go with him? Soon he reared up and grabbed the guy by the neck and started beating him. The guy asked him why he was doing this. Byung replied that it was his employer's request. The guy said he would pay more. How much did they give him? Byung thought and asked him in return, and how much was he willing to give? But his master was not happy about the job and shouted in the evening that he had told him not to use the martial art on the defenseless. And if he's going to keep going downhill, he may as well not show his face again. And never come back. Byung told the teacher to keep his voice down. He had come to say goodbye to him anyway. But the master was intensely angry and couldn't help himself. Byung told the monk that he had grown up on the streets and had seen nothing else. But what's the big deal about earning by violence? The teacher replied to him that he was a fool. His martial art has no meaning or soul, and all because his fists are haunted by greed. And one day he remembered his words. Soon he met Huang, who told him that he had not realized how cruel the world could be, since all the time he was the one who was beating, not the one being beaten. Even merchants from the back alleys without knowledge of martial arts can rally to fight back against him. And you don't have to be sad digging in hell. It's just karma. But that day he couldn't help himself and beat up everyone in his path. And afterward the master shouted at him that he had told him not to use martial arts on the defenseless. But then he met the head who said he was impressed. And he got on his nerves too. And he seems to have gotten him out of trouble. And doesn't the guy want to work for him? Baron asked him how much he could give. In fact, he wanted to live a life of wealth and power. Baron applied his technique and said as if he was in such a place, and used the snake in his attacks. Baron immediately used the snake-devouring iron bird attack, but Soho dodged his attack again. Baron saw that he had made it work, and now it was time to attack one last time. He pounced on him, screaming at him to die. But suddenly at the last moment Baron felt his foot just freeze. He still had a couple of meters left to touch his enemy, but Soho knew he wouldn't make it. And then he remembered his teacher telling Baron that his martial arts had no meaning or soul, all because his fists were haunted by greed. And one day he would remember his words. Soho had gathered enough energy for his strike, and Baron realized that his teacher had been right. Soho didn't kill him and immediately gave him a powerful blow to his head. And Baron realized that in the end his fists proved to be nothing. Soho tackled him and said he was grateful for the lesson. The boy in the evening said that his seed is an endless debt to him and the Silver Sea Trade Guild, and he does not know how to thank the Lord. Soho replied that he shouldn't. He was doing it for himself. The boy didn't understand and asked him what he meant. He realized that last night they had ended the dark past of the Walnut Oak Trading Guild. The head of the guild had initially denied his involvement in what he had done. But as soon as he showed the officer the golden yuanbao that Walnut Oak Trading Guild had, he immediately fell silent. And in his past life, he was beheaded for making fake money, so he knew that the gold yuanbao he used for blackmail was fake. And thus the incident was settled. Byung disappeared amidst all the chaos. Soho told the Lord that he was just a simple merchant, and by helping him, he was helping himself. Guan replied that he wasn't sure if he could retaliate, but he would do what he could. Soho said he liked his position. Then could he give up his son, or rather let him offer him a contract? Guan replied that he would, Mill. Soho turned to the boy and asked him if he had forgotten his agreement. Mill raised his head and understood that he had promised his master his help. In the evening, one of the mistress was taking a bath and asked the servant that Sun had turned to the Silver Sea Trade Guild. After hearing about everything Sun wanted to do, Madam started laughing and said it was curious. The next day Soho joined the rest of the kids and watched the puppet demonstrate its movements. Yen looked at it with astonishment and said that it was truly unfathomable, wasn't it? But Chief Inspector AK said he thought it seemed like such a waste to just offer it to the Chong's official. They could have put it on sale by now. And Guilpin replied that this doll is certainly fascinating, but after all, it just dances, albeit on its own. But will it sell well? Soho knew it would sell insanely well. AK told Go's head of communications that he didn't have a good eye. And this thing reeks of wealth, can't he smell it? Guo replied that if he was good at it, would he be the head of external affairs? AK took it in his hands and said that right now she didn't look anything special because of her simple appearance. But you should dress her up in a gorgeous outfit and add some jewelry. They will be swept off the shelves. Soho saw that the chief inspector saw things differently and he expected him to. Soho suddenly asked his father to give him his word. Even though it is important to sell the doll, however, it is necessary to solve Mr. Sun's problem first. Soho understood that Lady Chu's request for the doll was a challenge that Mr. Sun would never fulfill alone and was being used as a means of pressure. And if word reaches her that their trade guild has authorized this on his behalf, she won't let it go that easily. The head after the whole conversation thanked them for today's meeting. But Soho stayed and told his father that it was a secret pact they had made on their last journey with the Zhang ringleader of Mount Wudong. The head was shocked and asked, what other secret pact? After looking at it, he asked, was it the snow soul flower, white tiger spirit flower, and snow ginseng? All this, as the son said, is located on Mount Yuten? Soho answered his father that it was all right. The head asked his son if he was sure he wasn't mistaken in recognizing the spirit herbs. They had not had any of these plants in the last 10 years. Soho replied that he had studied herbal medicine records and memorized the image and characteristics of spirit plants. And he will deliver the collected samples today. And father can scrutinize. Looking at the samples, the head found it hard to believe his eyes. To think that he had returned from his first trip with some very interesting treasures. The head saw that his son had not ceased to surprise him lately. He felt almost guilty that as guild leader he couldn't praise his son openly. Soho arrived at work in the evening and with one last signature said it was done. And he barely made it in time. And now isn't it time to move on to the next item on the agenda? Stepping outside, Soho met his master and greeted him. The master replied that the journey had only ended yesterday and he was returning to teaching without even resting. And he must be exhausted. Is it okay if they keep up the pace? Soho replied that he just doesn't put off his duties, no matter how tired he is, and he can't neglect the promise he made to himself to train every day. The teacher said it was very good then and before I started, and he'd like to hear his thoughts on his first journey. And how does he feel? Soho replied that he wanted to become stronger than he is now, and compared to the magnitude of the impending disaster, and the power he has now is almost negligible. The teacher told the guy that if he wanted to get stronger, he had met many who wanted to get stronger. And for fame, for wealth, or simply out of reverence for the martial arts path itself. Once in a while, there were even those who seek power for revenge. But he seems to have his own. And will Soho name it to him? Soho replied that, as expected of a master, he could hide nothing from him. The answer to their question is to protect those he holds dear. And that is his reason. The teacher replied that it was understood. The teacher also noticed that his student had very good eyes. Strong but also kind. The teacher asked the student if they would start his training. Starting today, he would teach him sword techniques. Soho asked, what other sword techniques? His progress was faster in this life. In the past one, he spent a lot of time only practicing physical strength. The teacher replied that it was called the 12th form of the snow dragon sword technique. And this sword technique is inspired by the nature of snow. Soft and light, akin to a child's hair, a moment is like a blizzard, heavy and endless. And the other reflects the swiftness and sharpness of a blizzard. Soho closed his eyes and demonstrated the technique with his teacher. And each of the techniques of the 12th form of the snow dragon sword destroys everything the blade's tip comes into contact with. The teacher, seeing how his student handled it with ease, was shocked and didn't expect it. The teacher asked the student, what is this? Soho realized that he had not intentionally started the sword form dance. Soho replied to the teacher as he watched the teacher's incredibly graceful sword dance, and he just had an overwhelming urge to try to replicate it himself. The teacher asked the young master, didn't he himself say that he had mastered the divine sea of ice, sea of supreme in divine art on his own? And the snow dragon fist strike 12 form technique contains many transformations and its forms are extremely complex. Even just one look at it is completely insufficient to reproduce it in any way. And yet, just now he had reproduced it almost perfectly just by seeing a part of this technique. And there had been so many strange and unexplainable things about him up to that point, but now he finally realized what his secret was. Soho wondered if he had given it away too much this time, and told the master that in fact, the truth was. The teacher told the student that he was born with a monstrous gift in martial arts. And it seems he was lucky to have an apprentice after all. But there's no more time to waste on trivialities. And let him take his sword. And those who are blessed with talent must receive training worthy of that talent. And starting today, he'll be coaching his methods on a whole different level. And it's a rigid and strict method. And after that, Soho decided to open his to-do list and task slate. Soho took a look and decided to get started. After that, he and the guys headed to the store and asked, guests specifically looking for something? Soho replied that he was happy to meet her. He introduced himself and said that he was from the Eunhae trade group. The girl said they had such a rare visitor. And what brings him here today? Soho wondered immediately, what else? He's here to recruit talent. He has such an extraordinary ability that one day people will call him perfect. In his past life, his connection with her began on a rainy day when he took refuge in an old fabric store. And in that old and dilapidated store, there hung a silk dress woven too skillfully for such a place. And the moment he saw her, he knew he had to take her under his wing. Soho said his reason for coming was to contract her. And in that life, he was going to hire her too. The girl asked, a contract? Soho replied that yes, an exclusive contract with him. That is, with the Eunhae trade group. Soho then immediately crossed one task off his list. Suddenly entering the carpentry workshop, the man asked what had brought the young master here. Soho replied that he apologized for bothering them when they were busy, but he had a request for them. The young master immediately realized that he had already found a doll costume maker, and now he was telling them that it was only for the pride and the best representatives of their Eunhae trade group, and to whom he could leave this request. And then the workers got excited because they have to make the face of the doll. And now it all depends on the skill of the craftsman. And so after a few days, he came to the master's private workshop. Soho said he shouldn't work so late, and the sun has already set. If Mila overworked himself, he wouldn't grow up at all. The boy replied that he didn't mind if he didn't grow up anymore, as long as he could at least repay him a little. He gave his family a place to live and even gave him the opportunity to work like this. He can't express how grateful he is to him. Soho said that as the man who contracted with him, he rightfully deserves such privileges. The boy was surprised and replied that he didn't even know that. But Soho got angry and cut him on the head with his fist. Soho asked the boy if his work was progressing well. The boy said yes and asked the master if he would like to take a look. And he's almost finished it. And he's wearing the outfit that Lady Hong made. Yes, and he thinks the face turned out really nice. Can't wait to show it to his sister. But it's not something he can just give away to play. She might be a little disappointed. Soho asked the boy what he meant. Of course she should take one too. The boy was surprised and asked, "Really?" Soho replied that of course. What the guy is doing now is just a prototype. And when this is finalized, it will soon become the flagship product of the Eunhae trade group. And it is truly amazing. And on that level, the name self-dancing doll is perfect, his father said. The girl also said it was just unbelievably beautiful. And is she really that expensive? At the meeting, AK asked how come the master of Song Manor married such a beautiful woman. Replied that it was a bit rude to say. But Song told the head personally that he would never forget his kindness. The girl also thanked the head of the trade group, and said that when this beautiful creation is presented at an upcoming banquet, she thought it would be wonderful if Lady Orchid could be present as well. The head replied that he was really sorry about that, but he didn't think it would be possible. Their eldest son would soon be appointed to succeed the trade group. So his wife was very busy preparing for the ceremony. Sun smiled and said that it was a very joyous occasion. And young Master Jiango is already at that age, and he congratulates him in advance. Suddenly Soho remembered that day, and he held his brother's wound and told him not to pass out. On this day, Soho was holding his brother who had died in his arms and trying to call for help from someone. And it was Zhang Wu-jin, the loyal bodyguard who had been by Jiango's side since he was a child. After the tragedy which occurred on the day of the inauguration of the trade group's successor, Soho saw his father talking to someone. The head said that if he had taken Eugen's advice then and sent the guests away, he would not have died such a senseless death. He looked so genuinely happy when he saw the special task they had assigned that day. Soho knew his brother had to live the rest of his life drowning in regret and self-recrimination. And Soho realized that it was all for him, and similar to what Palgak or AM meant to him. Suddenly Soho looked closely at her and AM asked him what was he staring at. But Soho thought that's why this time he has to prevent him from dying.